me, that just carries a lot of importance, and I just think a lot of people out there listening to the show who have been meaning to call probably should. But again, there'll be listeners today that are listening and they're like, man, he's talking about me, man. He's like in my car with me. He's been in my car with me now, and they're still not going to call. And that's okay, because life gets in the way, and it's all about timing. Call when they get ready, and we're totally fine with that. But there are people out there today who are listening going, you know what, I'm going to call today because I'm going to leave that message. Jennifer's going to call me back on Monday, and they're going to set up a time. We're going to start the process. It's low-key. I don't pressure anybody. Everybody that comes in will tell you that I'm the same guy in the office I am on the radio. And yes, I do sound the same in the office as I sound on the radio before you tell me that. So anyway, Lou, it's been a great show. I love doing the show with you. I appreciate you. Appreciate all the listeners. If you want to give us a call, set up a discovery session, you can do that at 256-937-2010. Number again is 256-937-2010. Hope everybody has an awesome and blessed week, and remember to serve every person in every situation with a servant heart.
Investment advisory products and services made available through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business, WG Insurance Services. WG Financial Group is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by WG Insurance Services are not subject to investment advisor requirements. AEWM and WG Insurance Services are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. WG Financial Group is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial Group. This radio show is a paid placement.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is The Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live, online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, we're making some real progress on our fundraiser. We'll be giving you a in-depth update shortly. We talked to a veteran railroader about the train derailment in Ohio. We respond to some silly arguments about Medicaid, all that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show, we've got a phone number and the line is open. The line is open, folks. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also send us a text message or leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we might respond on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online, all at the Valley Labor Report, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining member of the program, we've got it set up. We got an email last week saying, I wish there was a way to auto pay, to just set up a auto pay-in thing. And you can do that at tvlr.fm/donate. Just click the auto pay button. There's a button in there if you go to tvlr.fm/donate, and you can, sign up at one of our 3 dues rates, or you can set a custom one and just set that to auto pay, and it'll automatically charge your card at the same time every month. So that's definitely an option. You can also buy our new hat, or it's not new anymore, or you can become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. And if you're a member of a union, definitely think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to me for more details on that.
Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program today belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor.
That's right. That's right. Although they should, because they're always the correct opinions and viewpoints. So yeah, like I said, we have gotten some made really good progress on our fundraiser, and we're very excited about that. Over the last week, our listeners have donated nearly $1,000 just in 1 week. Nearly $1,000 to expand our project, so that is awesome. We really appreciate it. That puts us 25% of the way to our goal in the first week of February, of which there are 4 weeks. So, I'm feeling really good about getting where we want to be by the end of the month. And I think that y'all are going to like what we do with the money. I think that we are, as unionists and organizers and people who, we have been, Adam and I have both in separate capacities, been responsible for the dues money of members. I think that we're pretty conservative in the way that we, spend people's money, and we want to try to make the best of it. And so just to recap for folks that weren't able to listen last week, we made a big announcement about the future of the show. We went into detail about where we're at now and where we want to be after the expansion. That video is on our YouTube page, so I'm not going to go into as much detail explaining what we're going to be doing. But in brief, the deal is that we want to expand the project. We want to do more, and that's going to cost money. Specifically with the expansion, we're going to begin doing original reporting by the Valley Labor Report. Some of that's going to be done in-house by myself and Adam. Some of that is going to be done by freelancers that we are going to hire to report on specific stories, maybe stories that they have more context with than we do, or maybe stories that they can be geographically closer to so that they can actually speak to people in person. We are going to do a new weekly show dedicated to labor history and education as an Adam solo project. So that's not going to be like a news of the day, not going to be commenting on this or that thing that's happening online. It's going to be totally labor history and education, and I think that's really cool. And we're going to be able to secure broader syndication of our work, both for written content and for in getting on more radio stations. Those are our goals. And to increase our output this much, we're going to shift a lot of the organization from a volunteer status to paid positions so that they can focus more time on the project. I mean, as much as as much as you can do with volunteer labor, there is definitely a limit. And I think that we're pretty close to hitting that limit here in this project. And so we want to pay folks so that they can set aside more of their time to work on the project. We're going to be paying the people that come on staff $20 an hour. I'm going to stay on as a volunteer. And by our calculations, this is going to require approximately $3,000 to $4,000 a month more than we are bringing in right now. So we're talking to unions and other organizations about coming on as financial sponsors or increasing their sponsorship. We've got some commitments and some tentative interest, but in the meantime, what we wanted to do is crowdfund the first month for money for the first month so that we could operate at that capacity to show unions and workers and potential donors that, hey, maybe it's worth it to come on as a sponsor of this project. Maybe it's worth having this, having this project expanded, their capacity expanded, their ability to do, their ability to do more. So that's kind of the thinking there. So yeah, we made that announcement last week. The reception was really great. We've raised nearly $1,000 already. We appreciate everybody that has donated. We really appreciate your support so far. And if you haven't donated yet and can, then please do so at tvlr.fm/expand. That is tvlr.fm/expand. You can also send us a check to our P.O. Box. That is P.O. Box 10047, Huntsville, Alabama 35801. P.O. Box 10047, Huntsville, Alabama 35801. So you can send us a check there or donate online at tvlr.fm/expand. But, I understand that sometimes people want something a little bit more tangible for your money. A little bit more tangible than I'm going to be supporting this project and helping them do a little bit more. And I understand that. So if that's the case, if that's, this position that you find yourself in, we've got something for you too, because today we are opening pre-orders for a new t-shirt with artwork by Tabitha Arnold. Tabitha Arnold has done lots of great work. I believe she was it her or Maggie Crabapple that did, I think it was Maggie Crabapple that did the cover for Max's book. But she's done a lot of good stuff. You'll definitely recognize the style when we show it to you. And so let's go ahead and cycle through the colors that we have on the YouTube screen so that people can see it. If you are, and if you're not watching us on YouTube, then you can go to our store, tvlr.fm/store. That's where you can check it out. So as you can see, we've got a black shirt with a white design. We've also got a white shirt with a black design. And just a reminder, if you're not watching us on YouTube, then you can go to our store and you can see these colors yourself. tvlr.fm/store. We have a red design with a black, we have a red shirt with a black design and a red shirt with a white design. And we also have a navy shirt. So very cool. I think the shirts are really cool. I'm really excited about these shirts. And, further, these shirts are, we all have the, we've all got these organization t-shirts that are like really harsh material. They're like Gildan type stuff. These are obviously 100% union made in America, obviously. But even with shirts like that, sometimes it's just like the quality isn't like what you would get if you go into like, a nice retail store or something and you get a graphic t-shirt. And so we wanted to do something, we wanted to get a little bit higher quality of t-shirt. And so we went with American Roots. They make high quality, soft, really high end, like retail level shirts They sent us a sample shirt because they're so confident in the shirts that they put out. And it definitely sold us. We really like it. Very soft, very high quality, 100% union made in America by American Roots. They're a manufacturing print shop and shirt manufacturing and print shop in Maine. So really,
with a fully unionized staff, I believe through the United Steelworkers, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. That's correct. And I believe they're woman-owned, too, I think.
Yeah, so I know from the pictures there's a very diverse crew that they have working there, and, that's great. A lot of reasons to do business with them and really appreciate the partnership.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, definitely go to our store, tvlr.fm/store. Try it out. They're $32 for a local pickup. And you add some more if it needs to be shipped to you. But if you're local in the area, like in Huntsville, or me personally, and you reasonably expect that we'll be able to run into, or we can run into each other at a certain point, and you're fine with waiting for that, feel free to just get the local pickup option for $32. It will be a little bit more if it needs to be shipped. And I know that's kind of pricey, but when you count the artwork that we paid for, we paid Tabitha to do, we commissioned this artwork. We paid her to do this. The shirts are, they're high quality, so they are high price. And the way that we did the math, we figure we need to sell them at $27.70 just to break even, right? So even at $32, we're not making a whole lot of money on this. Not making a killing by a long shot, but I think they'll be worth it. So yeah, if you want to support the expansion fundraiser for that we've got going during February, you can donate at tvlr.fm/expand. If you want to buy a shirt, which will obviously help us, as we try to expand the project, you can go to our store on tvlr.fm/store. You can check out the colors. Buy one of these shirts. We have sizes from extra small to 5XL. I confirmed with them that they make 5XL. So all shapes and sizes, extra small to 5XL. And you can check that out on our store, tvlr.fm/store. Also, don't forget to take our listener feedback survey. Adam posted that in the YouTube chat. And pre-orders for that shirt are going to be ending on the 28th of February, so they'll be shipping out sometime in March.
And thank you to everyone who has contributed so far, everyone who's taken the survey so far. It really means a lot. We appreciate it, and we take your concerns seriously, and it's really been very helpful as we plan this expansion.
Absolutely. Before we head to a break, I wanted to shout this out. Every year, the National Council on Occupational Safety and Health releases a Dirty Dozen report on employers who are putting workers and communities at risk, and nominations are open for this year's dishonors. You can fill out the form that they have with information about your terrible employer, and they will do the rest. We're putting that form in the YouTube and Facebook chats, and if you're listening to us as a podcast or on the radio, you can go to nationalcosh.org/DD-2023-nominations. That is nationalcosh.org/ that's a /DD-2023-nominations. All right, so if you've got a terrible employer, particularly as it relates to occupational safety and health, fill out that form. And
I'm sure we have none of those in Alabama.
Yeah, no, certainly not. Certainly not. That would be bizarre if we had that in Alabama. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and head to our first break. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking to Fritz Edler, a 40-year veteran railroader, about this train derailment that happened in Ohio, talking about some of the implications and talking about how this was totally predictable and avoidable. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host and fellow agitator is Adam Keller. We've got some conversation in the chat about the Temple University strike, which is going on right now, and and that's, I don't know just a whole lot about what's going on, but I know that grad assistants and teaching assistants are on strike, and their university is canceling their tuition reimbursement, which is
and their healthcare,
which is wild, when they could instead just pay them what they're worth. Wild stuff going on across the country. So last week there was a horrible accident in East Palestine, Ohio. To my knowledge, it hasn't yet claimed any lives, which we are very, very thankful for. But it has caused a lot of damage and made an entire community so unsafe that it is illegal for residents to go home, because for residents that are within a certain proximity of the accident to go home because the chemicals that were on this train are so hazardous. It's made all the more horrible because this was entirely predictable and avoidable. It's so predictable, in fact, that multiple railroaders have predicted that incidents like this will happen on multiple outlets. Working People with Maximilian Alvarez, he talked to a railroader, Jay, who described an incident, a hypothetical incident eerily similar to this one. There was a More Perfect Union video from back in December where a veteran railroader at a protest in D.C. again described a situation eerily similar to this one because they knew what the rail companies were doing to the industry, were doing to regulations, what they were doing to their workers, and they could see what was coming down the tracks. So we wanted to get somebody on to discuss this, and today we're joined by veteran railroader with 40 years in the industry. He is a past local and regional officer for the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, which is a Teamsters affiliate, and he's currently a representative for the Railroad Workers United, an inter-union cross-craft solidarity caucus of railroad workers. Fritz Edler. Fritz, thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning.
Well, thank you for having us on. And appreciate the Valley Labor Report because it's incidents like this and the general problem on the rails that is going to require regular people all across the country to raise these issues because unfortunately, up to this point, railroaders themselves using their vehicles and whatnot have not been able to get enough of a voice. It's all about stakeholdership, representation of railroad workers and the communities that are affected. So thank you very much. And
Absolutely.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah, well, so let's just start off with kind of a description of what's happened. How did this derailment happen?
Well, so from what we can tell, and these are evolving matters, of course, from what we can tell at this point, the train, which was made up on the 3rd of February down close to St. Louis, was headed to Conway, Pennsylvania. In the course of the route, it had a few problems, but the critical one was when a car in the middle of the train developed a problem with an axle. And this is a very classic railroad defect that is very dangerous. It's actually the cause of a great many derailments and wrecks. And this basically what happens is, as you can imagine, the axle and wheel are supposed to turn. If things interfere with it turning mechanically, then it can actually create a problem up to and including melting down so that essentially the axle disappears functionally. So at this point, this is what we think is the immediate, what they call approximate cause. The big problem going forward is not just to find out why it was that was allowed to happen, but what are the root problems that come before that. And that's really the critical thing, because there's a tradition in the Class 1 railroads of, they find the proximate cause, they find some individuals, they punish those individuals, and then they never have to address the policies.
Mm-hmm. And it was a concerning amount of time before the public even found out exactly what this train was carrying, right?
Yeah, and of course, this gets back to the crucial question of how the train is run. So in this case, the train had, fortunately for everyone concerned, this train had a crew of 3. Normally it would have been just 2, an engineer and a conductor, but they also had a trainee. So the fact that they had the crew that had the capacity to do things like separate the locomotive power, pull it away from the wrecked train to prevent further problems, but to be there on the site with their expertise and their knowledge of the consist and their ability to interact with the situation, that was a key thing. However, it took them a while, took the responders a while, and the authorities a while to figure out exactly what they were dealing with, partly because of fire. And so again, the key thing here is that they were able to determine fairly quickly what the consist was, but then the question was, where are the dangerous products and what's happening with them? The original instruction to the public was to shelter in place. There's a big question about whether that was the best response at the time, but there'll be a thorough investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board that'll report on these things. We just have to keep the pressure on them to make sure that a full public inquiry is made regarding this matter, and that all of the contributing factors, including the trying to avoid scheduled maintenance, the question of why the defect wasn't found earlier, because this is a ridiculous situation that you could actually have a train that has this kind of an axle problem that isn't discovered until the very last minute when it's too late.
Right. And this, and this train was carrying, what was it, chlorine?
It had various products. 20 of the 150 cars were hazmat cars. 10 of those 20 were involved in the 50 cars that actually came off the rails and tumbled. The critical ones, the ones that are getting the attention, is called vinyl chloride. It's a component in manufacture of plastics. It's a particularly dangerous chemical. And in this case, one of the results was when they finally ended up having to use a small explosive device to release pressure in some of these cars, they actually released byproducts, which were phosgene gas and hydrogen chlorine gas, into the atmosphere. Phosgene gas, for those who don't know, is a World War I trench warfare gas. These are dangerous things. There are things about the way that the train was maintained, the way that the wayside was maintained, the way that the train was blocked. All of these contributed to making the dangers worse than they would have had to have been.
And what does that kind of gas do? This actual literal weapon of war. What does that do when people make contact with it?
Unfortunately, that's beyond the scope of my expertise. I am hazmat certified, but what you basically do is you have reference materials to determine when you're figuring out, okay, this consist had this and this and this chemicals in it, and in this case, your big problem is fire. In this case, your big problem is air. In this case, it's explosion. In this case, the case we're talking about, the vinyl chloride has many bad aspects. And the real thing I would want to say, I mean, people can look up phosgene gas if they want to, but is that one of the things that happens in a hazmat wreck like this is that the intense heat of the fires actually produce brand new chemical components, toxic chemical components that weren't in the consist to start with. It's a chemical process, right? And those new toxic chemicals end up in the water and in the soil, and in some cases they're forever chemicals. This is one of the things we saw in the 2013 wreck in the town of Lac-Mégantic in Canada. So one of the things that the public has to do is they have to make sure that the authorities follow up on all of the byproducts of the disaster, not just the labeled ones on the tanks.
Right. And so it's still the case that people within a certain proximity are not allowed to go back home right now. Is that
Actually,
right?
I don't think that's true now. As to my knowledge, they were allowed to return, I want to say 2 nights ago. Okay. I believe it was 2 nights ago. And of course, there's still monitoring going on, and there have been some reports of detections and things like that, although they assure everyone still that they haven't reached the levels that are concerning. This is air quality we're talking about. So hopefully the monitors will be responsible to make sure that people know if it turns out that this is a problem that requires people to leave their homes again.
So, all this sounds bad, but, when I saw yesterday morning that that Norfolk Southern said they would give a $25,000 check to the Ohio town where this happened. So, I mean, this is, that's basically.
This is here's a story about that. So I referred to the Lac Mégantic wreck from 2013 up in Quebec, which was a terrible event. It's not the same as the circumstances of this one, but in that case, 47 people in that town died immediately, and some more afterwards. But the reason I mention it is because one of the first things that happened after that wreck was representatives of unscrupulous law firms started showing up in town and signing people up, for claim processing, liability stuff and everything. So what's going on right now is that the corporation is doing everything that they can to limit their liability and their exposure, shall we say, to response from the public, try to get ahead of it, try to create some legal protections. And that's what this money that you're talking about is part of.
Which, let's just, so in case anybody listening on the radio didn't catch that sarcasm, $25,000 for this accident is obviously not enough. There's I think somebody divided that by resident and it would be $50, per resident in this town. So it's obviously, certainly not, and, this shouldn't have happened in the first place, right? But now that it has, that's $25,000 is not enough. But let's talk.
From a company that made $12 billion in profits last year is my understanding.
And how many, Fritz, do you know off the top of your head, and I should have had this number ready, but do you know off the top of your head how much money they've spent in stock buybacks recently?
I actually do not know that figure, but it's a big factor, and it is on all the class ones. All the class ones that practice are currently practicing the operating. This is across North America. What they call precision scheduled railroading. So, but it's a big number, and what's happening is that instead of spending the money on making a safe railroad, which we know how to do. That's one of the things that's key here, is that the railroaders, and there are people in the industry that know how to do these things safely. They know what needs to be done. They know the science, and they're not allowed to because the corporations are dominated by hedge fund operations that dictate that their big goal is to do stock buybacks.
Right. And so, looking it up really quickly, Norfolk Southern announces new $10 billion stock buyback program. This was from March of 2022. So,
and over $2.3 billion in 2018.
Insane. And so let's, that's just to illustrate they've got money to fix this. And so let's talk about some of the things that they could have done. So, some of the things that we could do to avoid this. And one of those, Fritz, as I understand, is that this train did not have what are called electronically controlled pneumatic brakes. Can you talk to us about those brakes and some of,
Sure enough.
Yeah.
This is the thing that the industry itself did a lot of the research on and initially started having a favorable approach to. They call them ECP brakes. And then as soon as it started to be discussed that maybe this would be something that would be mandated, they all backed away from it. And now they spend a significant amount of money lobbying and using their power, which is way more than anybody understands, to make sure that they didn't get a regulation requiring ECP brakes. So essentially, the way that all freight and passenger trains in the country run today is an extension of an early 20th century type of braking operation that involves they're pneumatically controlled by a compressor on the locomotive, and the signal is carried throughout the train by the air pressure in the brake pipe that determines whether the brakes are on and whether the brakes are off. Now, this was a huge step forward in the early 20th century compared to how things were before. But today we have far better technology, and this is an example. So with ECP braking, the way it works is that there's actually electrically triggered braking devices on each individual car that we have the technology now that we can have each individual car act appropriately in the event of a braking situation. So in this situation, in the situation with this train without ECP braking, one of the things that happens is because the train parted in the middle at where the original problem with the axle is, causes the brake pipes to part. The brake pipe vents to atmosphere. There's an emergency application of the brakes. So for example, with the derailed cars, what you can see is that the first car that gets its brake applied is the first one where the brake is, and then the one behind it, and the one behind it, and the one behind it, and the one behind it. But what that means is that the heavy weight, and this train was blocked with the heaviest, 40% of its weight was in the last third of the train, is basically running up on a stopping car. So that's what creates a lot of the tumbling and stuff. But with ECP braking, you could actually have braking starting to happen at the rear, which would help to retard that momentum that's causing this jackknifing, tumbling thing. Now, if you look in back of me, the picture that you see right here is a derailment right in the middle of Washington, D.C., where I live. I had come back from Lac-Mégantic, a visit there that related to the 2013 wreck on the night before May Day of 2016. And we got up that morning. This is what took place right in the middle of downtown DC, and it was essentially a very similar kind of a cause, which was a defect with a wheel axle. And what the point that needs to be made here, so this wreck didn't hurt anybody, etc., but it was just luck that it didn't kill many people. It was only a couple of car lengths away from an apartment building and all of the transportation infrastructure you can see there. And it did have caustic materials that drained into the soil and into the water. So the ECP braking, which was your original point, is one of the ways we can move away from the dynamics of 19th century railroading.
Yes, and the Lever News has some really good reporting about what the industry has done to try to fight some of these regulations, and they have some really good history about the way that the Lever News reported it is that the Obama administration did eventually issue a very narrow, some very narrow rules about ECP brakes on certain trains that were very narrowly defined, too narrowly defined. I think they said hazardous trains have to have ECP brakes, but that hazardous was so narrowly defined that even this train would not have fallen under that definition. But then in 2017, the Trump administration rescinded it, and the Lever News has reached out to the Buttigieg Department of Transportation, and the Department of Transportation has said they have no plans to reinstate even this narrow safety rule from the Obama era.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a scandal. This is a complete scandal because, as you already pointed out, it's not like they don't have the money. And the science is there. The evidence is overwhelming that this would be a better, safer way. In my career, I ran high-speed trains that had ECP braking. And I can tell you personally, and there are others in the industry and in RWU who have worked equipment that had ECP braking that know that it's a better situation. So this is where our problem is, and it's going to require public outcry. which is the reason why I hope your listeners will also keep their ears open, eyes and ears open about possibilities, opportunities to be able to talk about why we need to change this. What we really need to talk about, though, I mean, the ECP thing is very important, but we need to talk about precision scheduled railroading, and we need to talk about, for example, the labor strife of the fall that centered around the question of scheduling. All those things are part of what happened in Ohio. The other thing is that the railroads, including the Norfolk Southern, got rid of so many inspectors, and after they got rid of those inspectors, then they did everything to get authority to do fewer inspections. So what we know now is that that through the grapevine is that the NS is doing what they always do, which is to go around looking for individuals to blame, so that they can then, discipline those individuals and not address the policies that got us to this place.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the precision scheduled railroading, I mean, the ultimate thing of that is that it's making too few workers work too much. And illustrate for us how it is helpful to, you mentioned that this particular train had 3 people on it, which made it easier for them to respond and try to lessen the damage to the extent that they could, whereas it would have been harder if there were only 2 people. And the train companies now only want to have 1 person on these insanely long trains. And so how is it, I'm just a layman. Why is it, asking this kind of rhetorically, why is it that having more people on the train is helpful?
Let me make it very simple. If you only have 1 person on the train, the only thing that train can do is go forward or stop. That is it, period, final. So when the corporations say that this is what they're interested in, they're saying to you that out of the thousands and thousands of trains that we send out, that they would like to have them not able to back up, not able to decouple, not able to separate, not able to do any of those things, which leaves, so even for the layperson, you can imagine that if what needed to be done was to back up, or what needed to be done was to uncouple something, that you'd have to have 1 person controlling the locomotive and another person doing the cut lever on the ground, right? But if you have a single person there's no way that can be done. So imagine even the millions of more mundane examples, like your community is cut off from emergency services because there's a train across all of the road crossings and they don't have the ability to cut the crossing. They can't, if there's a fire under a car, they can't uncouple stuff and move it away. There's single person crews can't do those things.
It's just
we have the industry
to the public.
It is. It's not just that. It's also very, very dangerous. Right. And this has been so. Back in 2015, I was part of some public hearings with the FRA on this question, and community after community, and senators and mayors and people from all across the country are in there testifying about the increasing number of problems that they're having at their crossings and their situations like that. But so far, the overwhelming power of these corporations, and we witnessed an aspect of that in this last round of bargaining, where they were able to get even the national administration to treat the dispute as if there was only one party to it, which were the railroad workers, and that they didn't have any rights to redress. So instead of addressing the cause of the redress, and that's still out there to be resolved. Right. But I should say that the PSR is not just a problem of not having enough people. That's a big part of it, but they also, because they're so interested in the operating ratio, they sell off equipment, they mothball locomotives, they get rid of hump yards, they sell real estate, all kinds of things that were assets that provided opportunities. There were tools that could be used to have safer operation, but it looked great on the next quarter's report.
Right.
That's something that's standing out to me is, and this is not a trend unique to the railroad industry, but it seems very egregious in the railroad industry, is that you have these capitalists just like strip mining their own capacity and you know, more or less sabotaging their own operations just to hit some numbers on the next quarter without any long-term thinking whatsoever about even their own efficiency in operations, much less worker safety and, you know, public safety.
Yeah, well, so you hit on a good point here, this financial strip mining thing, which is something that the hedge funds have done in a lot of other industries, where they take a healthy company and they strip mine it financially by this process of stock buybacks, basically. In other words, so they invest enough in the industry to get their people on the board. Their board votes for the policies that end up creating these situations with the buybacks. Then they can take their money and leave. And they basically, what they do is they end up leaving the rotting hulk of what was once a good performing corporation of one kind or another, with all of the, saddled with the debt that they've transferred all around. Now that is a process that's still ongoing with the Class 1 railroads in North America. Some of them are starting to make some noises, like they're understanding that essentially these policies that looked so good at the time are actually making it impossible for them to function certainly in a safe way going forward.
Yeah. And so, you know, I mentioned that you are, you know, you're a veteran railroader. You've been a regional officer of your union, and now you're a representative for the Railroad Workers United, which is a broad cross-craft solidarity caucus of railroad workers. And so what are y'all, you know, what is kind of y'all's 10-point plan, so to speak? I know that you don't have like a 10-point plan. What is your proposal?
Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, we try to make sure that everybody understands exactly what it is that precision scheduled railroading does. It's not precision, it's not scheduled, and it's not railroading. And the second part, pertinent to this, I mean, there's lots to talk about, but is that what we now know is that the people who live in North America cannot depend on the Class 1 railroads as they are constituted to not only keep them safe, but also not to serve them, not to provide the transportation services that we need. So Railroad Workers United has joined with other groups like United Electrical Workers and an increasing number of others to say that, look, we have ample evidence across the century that we need the railroads to be operated in the public interest, because the carriers, they'll play the common carrier utility card when it suits them, and all the rest of the time they'll say, hey, this is private, keep out, don't tell us what to do, even though they continually take and take and take and take from the public patrimony. So Railroad Workers United calls for the public ownership of the railroads. You can go to railroadworkersunited.org. You can see our resolutions on this matter, also on the technical matters that we talked about earlier, like ECP brakes. So Railroad Workers United functions in the way that we've needed for 150 years, which is all the different people and all the different crafts on all the different railroads are all divided up in one way or another. Railroad Workers United works to get a voice for all of the stakeholders, all of including the public. All the stakeholders need to be heard.
Kind of like one big union, something like that.
We're not. Railroad Workers United is not a union.
Right,
we're all union. We're almost all, except for the ones that work on short line railroads that aren't organized. We're all members of unions, and we are active in our unions. But what we find is that that's insufficient.
Right.
That's not. And in my career, As I said, I've been a local and regional officer. And I know the ins and outs. I know how it all works. I know where the bodies are buried, and we need a Railroad Workers United. We need an organization of this kind in order to do the things that aren't otherwise being done. To speak up. And one of the problems, and this is a practical one, is that the culture on almost every Class 1 railroad is that people who are actively on the job working are afraid to speak up. In recent years, we were able to successfully get some whistleblower protections, but historically, people are victimized when they stand up and they tell about what's really going on behind the curtain. So that's another thing that we're in a position to do with Railroad Workers United, is to be able to talk openly about the things that are not represented at any of the tables. And the regulators are largely captured by the carriers. They largely are an adjunct to the carriers, what they want. And this is a dangerous situation. We've got to do something about it.
And, talking about the regulatory capture, I cannot fathom the position that Pete Buttigieg is putting himself into. I mean, this is a guy that obviously he's got ambitions. And, how is it that he thinks he's going to win a Democratic primary, much less a general election, when his tenure at the Department of Transportation is so lackluster? I mean, we're talking about breaking a rail strike. We're talking about not, not even instituting after this major accident a incredibly narrow Obama safety regulation. Not even going beyond that, but just reinstituting a narrow. I mean, it's bizarre. But and I also wanted to for the public ownership of the rails, what you were mentioning there, I wanted to expand on that just a bit. We had a long conversation specifically about that with another member of Railroad Workers United, Paul Lindsay, and he pointed out to me that what y'all are calling for is not a public ownership of the rail companies, which is something that I would support and I would be fine with, but it's a little bit less. It's a little bit less than that, and it is literally an ownership of the rail roads. Just like the government owns the car roads, the government should own the railroads, because and this is something that maybe people don't know, the tracks themselves are not owned by the public, which is bizarre, which is really, really bizarre.
It's also pretty unusual in the world. In the world broadly, it's very weird that at least in a developed nation, that the infrastructure is just left in the hands of the private profiteers.
Right.
So now in Railroad Workers United, we're a diverse group. We have a number of different kinds of ideas about exactly what this notion of public control, public ownership is. But you've seen our resolution, and what we understand, the most important thing, which is something that people in this country have understood in the past, sometimes like World War I, is that you cannot count on the private boards of directors of the Class 1 railroads to do the right thing. So if we want the right thing done, we're going to have to take it over.
Yeah. Fritz Edler, veteran railroader, member representative of Railroad Workers United. Is there anything else that you think that you wanted to hit on before we let you go?
No, I would just say, please. I mean, the reason why this particular accident rose to the level that in public attention it did was because of the toxins and things like that. But as you look at the wreck picture behind me, for example, it wasn't the same way. Do we have to have people die? Do we have to have communities destroyed? Do we have to, in order to be able to stop this, pun accepted, whatever, stop this train, stop this process where the railroads are making, by policy, their properties less safe. And they're also making it a place where nobody wants to work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they admit now that they've gotten rid of too many people, but problem is it's pretty hard to hire a conductor when you tell them, first of all, you won't have any private life, and not only that, but we're trying to eliminate your job.
Right.
So they're struggling. One of the people on this particular wreck out in Ohio was a trainee. they're in the process of trying to get those people back because they desperately need them to just provide basic service. But so the railroads are making it a place where nobody's going to want to work, and that it's going to be every single day going forward an accumulated additional risk.
Yep. Fritz, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Yep. So long.
All right, folks. That was Fritz Edler, veteran railroader, former local and regional officer of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineer and Trainmen, a Teamsters affiliate, and current representative for the Railroad Workers United, talking about the train derailment in Ohio.
Yeah, definitely send my solidarity and love and support to Railroad Workers United. RWU is doing fantastic work. I think Fritz really hit on it, that it's something that's been long needed to have that kind of cross-craft solidarity. Get the members from different unions talking to each other amongst themselves, and then bringing in the public because we all have a stake here. Yeah. And I really appreciate him giving us some background on that, and certainly appreciate the work RWU is doing because I think a nationalization of the rails is absolutely.
I mean, it's when you say nationalization of the rails, I mean, he mentioned that they have some diverse views, and so maybe he was hinting at that he, kind of like me, thinks that it would also make sense to nationalize the companies themselves. But just setting that aside, their resolution calling for public ownership of the rails, of the tracks, is so common sense.
Yeah,
you would not allow UPS to own our interstate highway system. Right. Like, that just wouldn't make sense. That wouldn't make sense at all. So obviously, the rails should be owned and operated by and for the public good. So obvious.
Yeah, I mean, because look at what we've seen over the years. We've seen the railroad companies monopolize the railroad industry. They have systemically weakened regulations by lobbying these crooked sellout politicians and bureaucrats. They have reduced their own staff by thousands, people that they need to have safe, efficient operations. They've deferred maintenance and capital investments, all while engaging in these massive stock buybacks.
Right.
They've worked with the Biden admin and both parties in Congress to prevent their own workers from engaging in their legal right to strike, their human right to strike. And this is all happening while these rail barons, just like they're, coming back from the 19th century, they're engorging themselves on these record profits while stripping their own operational capacity in a way that threatens the American people and the American economy, to say nothing of their own workforce. So it's just really disgusting.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about Medicaid in Alabama and child labor in not just Alabama. We've been covering this child labor story in Alabama, and a lot of every time we cover it, we always get comments. Oh yeah, well look at where it's coming from. Alabama, herder, backwards Hicks, right? And this kind of stuff isn't just happening in Alabama. And in fact, Alabama is not the one trying to expand it. We're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Ironworkers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need ironworkers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host and fellow agitator is Adam Keller. We appreciate everybody tuning in this morning, participating in the chat and the Facebook discussions. We have a Ryan in the chat saying, I'm writing my first college essay on Harlan County because of you guys. Hell yes, Ryan. Thank you for that. That's awesome. That is very cool. We really appreciate feedback like that.
Yeah, feel free to send us the essay.
Yeah, would love to discuss with you. Call in and talk about it. Will from Teamster from California says, speaking of UPS, they just announced layoffs of the controversial 22.4 two-tier driver in response to our aggressive negotiations. And Infinite Content mentions that UPS and the Teamsters are about to go to war over this upcoming contract, and absolutely that's going to be the case for sure. So, and we're looking forward to covering that, and we're going to have to talk to some Southern Teamsters about this contract negotiations, because it's going to be very, very important, very nationally relevant and locally relevant. Adam, you said that we had a caller on the line from a 256 area code. Let's pull them up and see what they've got to say. 256 area code, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Mike, Alabama.
Mike from Alabama. What's on your mind?
I'm spent 30 years in manufacturing, over 20 years in the UAW. What I don't understand is how labor members can keep supporting Democrats when they're destroying all of our jobs. I mean, look at the pipeline. You worry about the railroads? Hey, we wouldn't be shipping shit on stuff on the railroads as much if we had the pipeline. Look how many jobs that cost. Hello?
So So the comment is you don't understand how union members support Democrats because they cost jobs. Is that it?
Yeah, look at the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean,
look at our steel situation.
So yeah. So our position on the show has always been that the union leadership, in our view, is much too wedded to the Democratic Party, is too reliant on them, just counts on them too much. But on the flip side of that we have two parties in this country, and look at the Republicans. Democrats are bad friends or they're neutral adversaries or whatever, but Republicans literally want us dead, right? I mean,
they do not. See,
absolutely.
That's the misconception you keep saying. No one, I love the ability of collective bargaining, but that's what it is. It's collective bargaining, and everybody, I'm sorry, you were saying the profiteers. If nobody was out for a profit, none of us would have jobs.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. There are, the government, for example, the Postal Service.
The government is the taxpayer.
The Postal Service runs without any taxpayer money, without a profit, and functions really well. But
look how much money they lose every year.
They don't lose money every year. And see, look, this is one of the issues. This is one of the issues, right? The Postal Service does not operate, they do not create a profit. They don't operate on taxpayer funds. They are self-sufficient, and they are also highly unionized. The Postal Service is. To destroy the Postal Services. To destroy the Postal Service, to try to privatize it, Republicans and Democrats in 2006 put on this onerous requirement for them to pre-fund their retiree health care 75 years in advance. No corporation has to do that. No private entity has to do that. No other government agency has to do that. They tried to do that specifically to make it look like the Postal Service runs in the red. If you take away that requirement, they are not in debt. 90% of their debt is wiped away if you take away that requirement and allow them to operate like any other business in this country, right? And so that's...
Go ahead.
Yeah,
yes.
So, that's one of the... And that was spearheaded both by, Republicans and conservative Democrats. But, look, I'm not interested in telling you that you should vote for Democrats or that, anything like that. And I agree that unions should spend much less of our PAC money, which is important to recognize that the PAC money is different than our dues dollars, right? Members voluntarily donate to PACs separate from dues.
Which is not dues.
Yeah, it's not dues.
That's what the members vote, but members do not give very much money to PAC money.
Right, but the money that we do... Yeah, the money that we do give to our PACs, I think less of it should go to politics in general. I think more of it should go to organizing and stuff like that.
But tell me this, are you that naive that you don't think dues money funds Democrats?
PAC money funds Democrats, not dues money.
Yeah. Well, I paid dues for a long time, and what I discovered was that whereas we wanted COLA pensions for the membership, we shouldn't get it. But our bargaining committee always managed to make sure that the national, they always have COLA on their pension. What do you do with that?
Hey, I'll jump in here on that and just say that I think you're speaking to a problem that we have inside the unions that's real. And whether you're conservative, liberal, left wing, right wing, doesn't matter. All members deserve respect and dignity inside their unions, and
Of
transparency
course they do.
and democracy. And unfortunately, that hasn't always been the case. And I know, you
No,
mentioned the one
I
you're
don't know
affiliated
of
with.
any case, and especially local unions. I've been in local union politics. I've been elected, been appointed. Hey, I'm proud for the wages and benefits that the unions have negotiated. What I'm afraid of is like one of my buddies, anything that's to do with business or industry, he's against them because they're employers. There's nothing wrong with employers. There's problems in every industry, every business. But when you turn your back on the very people that have been supporting it, like the union members that could be working on a pipeline that could be preventing these rail disasters by pumping the fuel in the pipeline, the most safest way to transport it, how do you justify it?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the pipeline, stopping the pipeline, killing jobs, and one of the reasons that, I mean, one of the things that people say about pipelines is that it's more efficient. And what does more efficient means? It means it's actually, if you have the pipeline, you're going to have some short-term construction jobs, but you're going to have less people working to transport the oil. Pipelines actually put people on the trains out of work. They put people who are transporting oil over cars out of work.
So, hey, we put the ones transport. We're talking oil, fuel, the backbone of America's economy and productivity. We're not talking, we lose. You're going to get more jobs by increasing fuel production, safely transporting it, and the jobs that are going to come from the lower cost to the American people. Right now, the economy's in the friggin' tank, man. Look at inflation. Most of that can be tied not just to this crazy-ass shutdown, but COVID shutdown, but because of fuel costs, period. And Democrats, Biden said the other day, well, we're going to need petroleum for another 10 years. And last year he said, going to be out of that business in 10 years. Tell me, how do we justify this behavior?
Isn't the U.S. producing more oil under Biden than we did under Trump?
No,
I'm not sure. I'll say this as a union member that I'd love to see union jobs transitioning off of fossil fuels, and to me a good job is something that benefits the community, not pollutes the community. So I hear what you're saying, because we have lots of brothers and sisters working in the fossil fuel industry, and I don't want to ever see them lose jobs, livelihoods, benefits, insurance, anything. But
but do you want the average American, who some of them grow up to be union workers, do we want them to grow up in a nation where we're dependent on China for the battery power on electric cars? And people seem to forget it's all going to be natural gas, coal, or nuclear that's powering these electric cars. People seem to think that electricity just comes out of the air. That's stupid.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely important to understand where stuff happens, but, I think that, I mean, the CHIPS Act is one thing that I think it doesn't go far enough, but there's steps being made to bring some of our manufacturing back to the U.S. I mean, my understanding is that more manufacturing jobs have come back in the last couple of years than have since.
Go back about 6 years.
Yeah, I think we were still outsourcing jobs 6 years ago.
If you look at the stats on what came back to the country, and more people, even Democrats now.
Trump literally went to, and we're going a bit long on this, and also it's like this conversation is, it's not what we are focused on. We do want to do some amount
I know we're on rail. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But Trump actually went to a factory in Lordstown, Ohio, and said, don't sell your houses. I'm going to make sure that your jobs stay here. And they didn't. They left under his administration. Under his administration, those people lost their jobs.
And it's never happened under a Democrat.
No, it has happened. Bill Clinton signed NAFTA.
Look, hey, I was raised up when Clinton was telling us how good NAFTA was. All right,
I know
you can't look NAFTA, Clinton. That was a lot of smoke up our butts.
Yeah.
How many jobs we lose?
Hundreds of thousands, at least.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hey, Mike, I appreciate you calling. Appreciate your long-time membership in the union as well. I know we got another caller on the line, but feel free to call back next week. And just remember, we're union guys. We're not Democrat, lovers. We have our critiques of the Democrats.
Before you called in, we were just talking about Buttigieg and Biden.
So you'll find no love for them on this show.
I appreciate that very much. You nailed it on Buttigieg.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, hey, I appreciate you calling
time.
Right,
thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
We had another caller?
We did. Let me see if I can get them on the line. Oops, they have dropped.
They've dropped?
Yeah, so.
If you want to call back in, feel free. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-TVLR. 844-899-8857.
I know we went long on that. I don't want to belabor the point, but I do think it's important. I think it's important to emphasize that, like the pipeline jobs, I do hear that a lot. I understand why that's a valid concern for some folks, but a couple things on that. For one, the amount of jobs we're talking has been vastly exaggerated, both in their length and then their quantity of jobs involved. But more important than that, to me, as someone who hopes to be on this earth for a little while and who has a daughter who, we hope is going to be on this earth for quite a long time, is that we are literally destroying our ecosystem.
Right.
And fossil fuel companies are putting their short-term profits above the long-term survival of the human species, along with all other living species on this planet. So for me, arguing about pipelines, that's not even where we should be at. We should be building good union jobs to restore the environment, to have a clean energy grid, to get us off this pollutant, toxic stuff that is killing so many of our people.
And in the chat, somebody said, didn't the pipeline just leak in Kansas a few weeks ago?
And I think someone else said,
the case. Yeah.
all pipelines leak, and that's true. I mean, and that's it's not just natural gas. It could be any number of chemicals involved, and the fracking process itself is very destructive to the environment. The methane leaks. So, there's a lot of costs that come with that type of economic development. And what I'm suggesting is that we can have good union jobs in our communities that don't involve poisoning our communities.
And
that's a devil's choice that we've been presented. Just like the choice between Democrats and Republicans. You can get screwed in one way by these people or screwed in a different way by those people. How about we not get screwed?
Right.
And we as working people, if we come together in mass and stop bickering over some of the little stuff, we can transform this country to do that.
And I think the caller is a good example of people can have different opinions about this or that thing,
right.
but the important thing is that we that we do come together and we have more collective power, and that whoever is in office, that we have enough power as working people to make them do what they ought to do. And I think a good example of that is in West Virginia back in 2018 when the teachers went on strike and they forced a Republican trifecta to give them a raise and do this and that and the other thing.
Beat off the insurance attacks, the attacks on their health care and pension.
Where obviously, and it's just the case that Republicans are antagonistic to working people. I mean, they
do not support collective bargaining rights.
Yeah, to the organized working class. I mean, we've had a coal miner strike. Talk about coal, right? This is a bit different because it's metallurgical coal. It's not energy coal. But we talk about coal, and if we're going to have these jobs, they need to be good. They need to be good paying. They need to be union. And we have one of those places that have been on strike for 2 years in this state, and not a single Republican politician has come out in support of these workers.
And nor will they.
Whereas at least there's been a couple of Democrats that have made some amount of noise about, I support them even though they haven't done nearly as much as I think they should, right? But look, there's why aren't these are coal miners. Why? And when Tommy Tuberville had the opportunity on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee to speak to an Alabama coal miner in D.C., he read from the International Private Equity-owned Warrior Met's press release.
Right.
At their hearing. There was a hearing on what private equity is doing to working people, and an Alabama coal miner, Braxton Wright, testified in front of our senator, Tommy Tuberville, and he responded by reading off some boss BS from international private equity ghouls, right? That's what these people are doing.
Right. They love the coal barons, not the coal miners.
Right.
Coal miners are just as expendable as every other worker in this country. The railroad workers, the service industry workers, the teachers and nurses. They don't have any love for those coal miners or the other fossil fuel industry workers themselves. It's about the industry executives, the hedge funds who are invested in these industries. It's not about the working people. Not at all.
We've got a couple other segments that we had lined up, but we are running short on time. And so I figure what we'll do, Adam, is talk about this update to the Chilton County stuff. You want to do that, or do you think we have enough time for one of these other segments? It's up to you.
Let's see. Personally, it looks like we have enough time to at least mention the child labor situation.
Okay, yeah, that's right. That's a good call. Good call. So we've been following here in Alabama this big story. I think it should be a lot bigger, frankly, because of what it is about children, like 12-year-old children, working for Hyundai in manufacturing environments. And not just any manufacturing environments, manufacturing environments that have had OSHA fines, violations for amputation and crush hazards, right? So this isn't even just the normal, manufacturing is dangerous. This is manufacturing that is so dangerous as to have violated the law. That's where these children are working. And we've covered this story with, in my view, the appropriate revulsion anytime that we talk about this. There's some, to a certain extent, we want to be like a news thing and we want to do reporting and we do some reporting and we want to be truthful and we want to, relay the facts and not embellish stuff and certainly not make stuff up. But, there's this idea that to be truthful, you've got to be neutral. And that's just... I just don't buy that. I don't buy that. I think that, we're talking about child labor. I don't think it's that important to be like, oh, but, the bosses say it's okay. Blah, blah, right.
Both sides, right?
And anytime I talk to this story with other people, like in my personal life, when I'm talking, most of the people that I know in my personal life are like conservative. They react the same way that I do. They're like 12-year-old children working in manufacturing plants. That's crazy. Because that's appropriate. That's the appropriate reaction when you hear children working in car plants. The reaction should be revulsion, okay? I thought we dealt with this 100 years ago. But not everybody has that reaction when they hear about child labor in dangerous environments. In fact, it's quite possible that Iowa Republican State Senator Jason Schultz heard this story. Actually, it's possible he was listening to us on the radio and said, "Oh man, you know what? That sounds like a good idea." That sounds like a good idea. Because just last week, he put forward a bill that would allow 14 to 17-year-olds to work in mining, meatpacking, demolition, operating guillotine shears, and other dangerous jobs.
People who aren't even old enough to get a driver's permit.
14-year-olds. This guy, a Republican, I mean, that's a fact, right? This guy's a Republican, wants to allow 14-year-olds to work as a coal miner. The exact same scenario, the whole, one of the big things about the child labor laws that we got was because of the public reaction to seeing children with soot on their faces. He saw that picture and was like, hell yeah! That's America, right?
Cha-ching, cha-ching.
I bet that boss saved a lot of money over hiring somebody normal-sized.
Less calories, don't you know?
It's crazy. And look, and here again, I think most people, even conservatives, even people who vote Republican, I say it's worth noting that he's a Republican because it's worth noting that he's a Republican, that this is what, a Republican elected official is doing, right? And also, for our previous caller, this is a Republican who said that his proudest achievement is pushing a bill that ended collective bargaining rights for public sector workers in Iowa. That's his proudest moment, this guy, right? So, but look, I think that most Republican voters are rightly repulsed by this, but that's not all. Under his bill, employers would not be civilly liable if the children are injured or killed, even if the accident happened at work due to the company's negligence. Bills like this are cropping up all over the place, usually backed by the National Federation of Independent Businesses, as reported in the American Prospect by friend of the show, Sarah Lazare, and as we discussed with her on the program a few weeks back. But I mean, this is just crazy. Bosses are so averse to just paying people, and paying them well and treating them right, that they would literally rather have children go down into the mines than just pay an adult to do it.
And there's some folks who think we ought to be grateful for that. We ought to be grateful for those capitalists being willing to employ our children and give them jobs.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
Stockholm Syndrome.
But folks, our UMWA brothers and sisters are still on strike. You can donate to their strike pantry fund at paypal.me/UMWA Strike Pantry. The Tennessee Valley Progressive Alliance is hosting Dana Sweeney on March the 14th at 6 p.m. in downtown Huntsville Library Main Auditorium. The Labor Notes is having online workshops. And the next one is February 23rd. Buy our merch, TVLR.fm/store. Donate to the expansion, TVLR.fm/expand. We're heading into overtime. It's going to be great. All power to the workers. All right, folks, we're off the radio now. We appreciate you hanging in there with us. Appreciate the caller. Maybe he's listening to us now. Probably not. He's probably just listening to us on the radio. But we do appreciate that guy. We do appreciate him calling in.
Yeah, I mean, he's just like a lot of folks that are, I think about a lot of folks like my, grandparents' age and uncles' age.
No doubt
and
a good guy.
that sort of thing. And, lots of mixed opinions and some mixed experiences. And I meant what I said about the union aspect. I know it's something our brother David Story wrote about in Labor Notes just this week about secrecy, lack of transparency, personal ambitions and personal loyalties, things like that getting in the way of the real work of the union. And so that's something that we all in the movement have to consider, is that there are folks who have been done wrong by the movement, or at least by the institutions that make up the movement. And so, that's something that's real that we have to respond to. And I think that's why, it's important that we do what we do and continually call for democratic, bottom-up, rank-and-file led unions, and support the work of Labor Notes and others who are doing that kind of work.
Yeah. So in overtime, we're going to be talking to Walker Bragman about a piece that he did about Jimmy Dore, this internet personality guy, about his work contracts. We're going to be talking to Brad Alsop from ESVN about sports. Going to be going over some Grievance wins. And I don't know if we're going to have time for some of the stuff that we missed in the main show, but yeah. So it's going to be a great overtime. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be some real good conversation. So make sure you stay tuned, folks. We are going to be right back with overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral air. You'll either be a union man or a thug party H player. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Back. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. This is Alabama's only union talk radio program. We're now in overtime. That is the online-only portion of the show. We are on Facebook and YouTube. This will be up as a podcast later. This part of the program is also on internet radio station Unclaimed Mysteries Radio here in Huntsville. We got some good stuff for you today. Going to be talking about Jimmy Dore's anti-worker contract. We're going to be talking to Brad Alsop from ESVN about sports. Going to be talking about some really cool grievance wins that people were talking about on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. So really great stuff. Really looking forward to getting into that. And we are going to start off with this Walker Bragman piece about Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore is an internet media personality. A lot of folks that are listening to us maybe don't know him because we're more in the, we're definitely more in the labor media space as opposed to the YouTube media space. But he's an internet media personality. He loves to posture as the most pro-worker, the most pro-Medicare for all, even though he endorsed a candidate for president who said Medicare for all is un-American. People don't really like to be reminded of that. But, the most this and the most that, right? He's the most. Well, even just from his commentary, in my opinion, there's all sorts of reason to doubt this. One being the thing that I just mentioned, right? He endorsed a candidate who says Medicare for all is anti-American. But another, we covered this last year when it happened, when he sided with Biden Democrats and Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot against the Chicago Teachers Union in their fight for a safe return to work program, saying that, teachers were fear-mongered by Fauci, right? And so, there's some reasons just from his commentary to be like, is this guy really the most pro-worker? Is that, an accurate summary of his views? Well, more reason has come out to doubt his pro-worker bona fides. And to discuss this, we've got the man who brought some of that to light, journalist Walker Bragman. Walker, thanks for talking to us this morning.
For having me on.
Yeah, glad to have you. So your piece is titled Jimmy Dore's, quote, very pro-employer, unquote, work contracts. So tell us what exactly is so pro-employer about them.
Well, Dore's contracts have a really extensive non-disclosure section. Now, NDAs are common, in the entertainment industry and whatnot, but Dore's is 3 pages long and 9 parts, which is very extensive. Under this agreement, the contractor would not be able to discuss, say, verbal abuse that they experienced working with Dore. And that's a problem. Sometimes NDAs are as short as a paragraph or even a sentence. It's not, there's no hard and fast rule that it has to be this thorough. Now, the NDA comes with a liquidated damages clause. There's so $10,000 in liquidated damages per breach of the NDA, which is a lot of money for a contractor working on an internet show. So there's that. And then there's also conflicts under the contract go to arbitration. There's a forced arbitration clause. So as I'm sure your audience knows, arbitration is where parties take their dispute out of court and hand it over to an arbitrator. And that arbitrator, typically, they're seen as more favorable to the employer. Right. Workers tend to get lower rewards from arbitration. They're likely to win less frequently in arbitration, and arbitration is costly. Mm-hmm. Arbitrators have to be paid generally on a daily basis, so day-to-day basis. So it's expensive. And under Dore's agreement, the arbitrator, the costs of arbitration are split between Dore's company and and the worker. So there are a lot of cost barriers here to airing out grievances or holding Dore accountable.
And you mentioned in your piece that arbitration can sometimes be preferred by unions, and I think it's worth mentioning that arbitration in collective bargaining agreements is really pretty. The power the power balance is really pretty different than it is in a the reason that unions sometimes prefer arbitration is because they feel like they have been able to select an arbitrator with the company that is going to be more fair. Whereas when just an employer says, in an individual, not collectively bargained contract, saying this is the third party arbitrator that I've chosen, take it or leave it, right? It's totally different. Totally different. That's the reason that unions sometimes prefer arbitration, is because we have the ability to say, like, okay, this is who we're going to have as the arbitrator. These are the rules that they have to follow. You also mentioned in your piece that, that arbitrators don't have to follow, necessarily the law or past precedent and stuff. And that's, really important for folks to understand why forced arbitration is pretty uniquely
There's also very little recourse. Very little recourse. If the arbitrator gets it wrong, I mean, you're kind of SOL. It's not. There's no way to spin this contract as favorable to workers or in any way even neutral. I mean, it's very clear what who the contract benefits, and that is Jimmy Dore.
Right. Absolutely. And that is, some of this stuff, it is not uncommon that arbitration is in employment contracts. It's not uncommon that NDAs are in employment contracts. It is uncommon, how long and extensive and thorough his NDA is. And, it's worth questioning, why is it that he doesn't want people that he works with, being able to talk about his investments or his business partners? I don't have any issue talking about
or his performance, which his performance, like on the job, like how does Dore do his, like, this is basically, it's just a gag order. You can't talk about anything. Now, there's the, obviously I wanted to protect the source or sources that I got this from, so that I couldn't explore all of the legal issues that may be tied to this contract or maybe not. But those ones, the NDA with the liquidated damages clause, which liquidated damages, by the way, just to clarify for people, are agreed upon damages for violation of particular contract terms. So in this case, any violation of the NDA, any of its provisions, triggers automatic damages in the amount of $10,000, which can really add up. That is a lot of money. And the power imbalance here, as you mentioned, there is a very clear power imbalance, and it favors Jimmy Dore. And for a pro worker guy, I don't know.
Ask maybe a stupid question here, but I just want to clarify: his staff is not unionized, correct? Do the employees have a union?
I don't have the answer to that, but I don't believe so. Let me say I don't know for sure, but my understanding is that there is not a union. I could be wrong.
And I think, well, the contract you just described is probably a good indicator that there's not. But
also,
this isn't even an employment contract. This is an independent contractor agreement. So this is like somebody that if you were somebody that was going to contribute in any way to Jimmy Dore's show in the summer of 2020, this might be what you received as your agreement.
Interesting.
And I think for me, there's a difference in, when we're talking about, this or that, like celebrity or micro celebrity, like their personal behavior. I think when we're talking about their relationship as an employer to their employees, that's pretty qualitatively different than whether or not they've got a big house. You know, people talk about his big house or Hassan's big house or Bernie's 3 houses. You know, that is not as important to me. You know, I think that if I were any of these people, I would probably not keep as much money as they have, right? But you know, maybe I would, I don't know what I would do in that situation. But how they treat their employees or business partners, people that they work with, that is, to me, much more, you know, telling of their priorities, much more revelatory of whether or not we ought to trust them, right? Because it's just a totally different thing. It's not, you know, it's on a totally different level from whether or not you have money when we're talking about how you treat your employees.
The fact that he does have that money, though, is relevant to the contract because Dore has more power in this situation than a contractor. You know, now that's not to say, who knows, you know, the contractor could be very well have very deep pockets, in which case you know, this might work out more evenly. But typically, in my experience, people who do contract work for independent shows and media do not have very deep pockets. So the fact that Dore has that money, is able to buy a nice house, is able to that is power imbalance. So I did include it, not because, you know, whatever, you have a big house, whatever, but in this situation, you have more power than the person that you're dealing with.
Certainly.
And,
it's relevant. It's relevant and worth noting for the story, but it's not like you wrote an article about Jimmy Dore has a big house.
Right. Like I that doesn't really, you know, when that news came out, I wasn't like, oh, Jimmy got, you know,
right.
Like whatever. This is much more serious, because this is how you treat people that work for you. Like,
and so this, and what you were mentioning there about the power imbalance, that can take us into some of the response from like Dore's orbiters, because he's not responded to this himself, or is that right?
That is correct. You know, I gave Jimmy Dore multiple opportunities to go on record. I sent him 2 emails, and I followed up in direct message over Twitter, because we follow each other, and we have communicated that way before. So I sent him those emails. I sent him messages on Twitter telling him to check his email, to get back to me, to let me know, and to respond to not only the contract, but the allegations that were made by people that have worked with Dore in the past. Namely Dan Evans, who was Dore's producer at TYT. So Dore didn't take me up on it. When the article came out, he didn't come after me. He went after Jordan Sheridan from Status Quo, and he said that his agreement, that his NDA was standard, and then attacked Jordan personally. And then Aaron Mate, who's a writer for Gray Zone, came after me. I talked to Aaron separately, privately over DM. So, you know, I know Aaron. I like him. He's a, you know, a decent guy, in my mind. And but yeah, then the responses from Dore World have been like, this is just a standard contract. Like, you've got nothing. I can't believe you're making a big deal out of this. And it really comes down to fundamentally a misunderstanding of contract law and how contracts are written and what these provisions actually do and what they are. And like, you know, yes, NDAs are common. That is true. This is not a standard NDA. I have not seen an NDA that is this thorough. Now, granted, if you, you know, this could be a form contract. So it could be that this is like a standard contract, but it's a very heavily employer favored standard contract.
And it's worth noting that Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report mentioned that they did not have these in the contracts from TYT. So it's not even like, oh, he just took his contract with TYT and turned it into a contract for other people. It's like this is different than what he was used to as a TYT employee, which is pretty interesting. And the idea that it's standard. One, like you mentioned, it's not, but also it's worth questioning whether quote unquote progressive people should operate as standard bosses. I don't, standard bosses suck. Standard bosses are really bad. And,
exactly.
And so maybe we shouldn't act like them. But the craziest thing that I saw, I was reading through some of these, and you mentioned that Aaron Monte, one of his things was this is just standard, this is standard. And it's that's silly, but, okay, fine. There's a network of YouTuber people called the Revolutionary Blackout Network, and one of them, her name is Sabby Sabs, and she was covering this, and she just deployed straight up, Cato Institute Koch brother boss shit in her defense of Jimmy Dore, which is why? Why can't you just, if you're a fan of Jimmy Dore, some of the work that TYT does, I think is good and I think is important, and I think it's bullshit the way that they reacted to their union campaign. Why can't you just say that? I'm a fan of Jimmy Dore, but I think this is a bullshit contract. Why do you have to defend everything that he does because you're somehow aligned with him? It doesn't make sense to me. But the thing that she said was, quote, if you had a problem, then don't take the job. They're acting like these people were forced to sign this contract and do the job. They weren't. And it's
yes, of course.
Holy crap, this is a person who calls herself a revolutionary, a socialist.
As we know, in every setting, in every employment setting, there's the person taking the work has the power to just get up and walk away. Absolutely. Of course. If you didn't want to pee in bottles, why'd you work at Amazon?
Exactly. If you signed up for this. If this is exactly every single worker who has ever organized in a workplace has heard this anti-union bigotry. And this is coming from a revolutionary socialist.
Yeah, the revolutionary case for arbitration and gag orders. What?
Yeah, and somehow the revolutionary case sounds somehow it sounds exactly like what the National Restaurant Association is going to tell us.
Of course, but done in a revolutionary way.
Right. Of course. So it's
so ridiculous. It's just come on, if you're going to critique the story, do the basic research, understand the issues involved. Come on. This isn't hard. This is just basic. Arbitration is bad for workers. Generally speaking, you shouldn't have arbitration clauses. Now, that's not to say there are some, not every arbitration clause is as thorough as Dore's. Dore has an arbitration clause, and he also specifies that you explicitly that the contractor gives up their right to a jury trial. That's an added layer of protection for the employer. That's not in every arbitration clause. Now, granted, that's the effective arbitration. You give up the right to a jury trial, but without it being stated explicitly, I guess there's more room for workers in a legal side. I don't know why they add it. I would assume that it gives more protection for the employer. That's ridiculous. It's just, it spells out everything so explicitly. There's cost sharing. We're not gonna, we're not covering if you lose, attorney's fees are, you're going to be paying our attorney's fees as well. This is really, really punitive. It's just so, I don't know. Again, without being able to reveal anything about sources where I got this contract, we can't explore all of the issues, but these are the big ones that stand out.
Well, I've got to say, if Jacob came to me and wanted me to sign a contract like that to participate on this radio show, not only would I question my involvement here, I would question his leadership in his union, right? I might be making some calls behind the scenes, like,
yeah,
you know, this
of
guy,
course.
like,
yeah,
you
like,
really gonna elect this guy to something?
Yeah.
Just saying, like, you know,
Yeah,
so
it's weird.
I have no dog in this fight. I purposely try to avoid knowing who these people are. I don't know if I've ever watched more than 5 minutes of Jimmy Dore. And Jacob probably forced me to watch that. But I'm just speaking, as a worker who is on the left and who is a believer in unionism. That would be my response. And so, to me, it's how is this any different than some of these like quote unquote progressive nonprofits we've seen busting their unions and imposing same kind of conditions on their workers. It's, I get that it's kind of a niche topic, but there's a trend to this. There is a trend, and Jimmy Dore's not the only person who talks progressive out of one side of his mouth while acting very differently when it comes to his own employees or contractors. We can think of a lot of folks.
People got to live their values. You got to live your values, right? Or to the extent that you can.
Right.
You especially with how you treat workers, you got to pay them well. You got to, not bind them to arbitration. not prevent them from speaking out against bad working conditions.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's the huge focus on that because, like, dude, you talk on YouTube for a living. That's what you do. Is you just kind of like you talk shit on camera and people along with that. Like,
right?
Are you really that scared that someone who has worked for you could also go out and just talk? That is suspicious to me.
Well, and Adam, I don't know if you've read the piece, but Walker mentions that Jimmy Dore on his YouTube show has critiqued NDAs before. When it came out that Trump made people sign NDAs, he said this is very right-wingy. This is bad.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's confidentiality for me, but not for thee. Right. Yeah, it really like. It's incredible to me to watch sort of Dore's orbit cope with this. And that's what they're doing. They're coping. They're struggling with it. It's hard for them to accept. It's like, this is, and I should mention that a lot of, Dore has fostered this sort of ecosystem where he amplifies these individuals, where he gives them platforms and shares his audience with them. They build an audience together. It's very, in a way, it's a lot like what the right does, where you see like the same actors going on each other's broadcasts and whatnot, like Ben Shapiro appearing on, Crowder or whatever, So
it's a little cottage industry.
Yeah, it's a little cottage industry, and so when this gets revealed about Dore, the response is like, we have to protect Jimmy Dore at all costs because there's a personal stake in it, right? But like, it's just, I never thought that I would see a day when leftists were defending arbitration and forcing workers to give up their right to a jury trial, or
just saying if you don't like the conditions of the job, then don't take the job. Like, that is, to me,
that
the
is so
the most
ridiculous.
damning. Like she's so struggling to come up with a way to defend Jimmy Dore that she's just falling back on stuff that she heard on right-wing talk radio. Like that.
Yeah.
The people who call our show angry say stuff like that.
We have had calls like that. If you don't like the job, then just work somewhere else. I mean, that's what I was reporting on the paper mill lockout in Alabama. And I was asking representatives in that area if they had supported the workers, and a Republican representative said, no, I'm on the side of management. If they don't like it, they can work somewhere else. That was verbatim what Republican Representative Debbie Wood told me about a work dispute in Alabama. And this is what a revolutionary socialist is saying. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Well, it's worth pointing out that there's a lot of overlap here between Dore World and the right on many issues these days. Like, when it take COVID, for example, you see the same conspiracy theories espoused on Jimmy Dore that you hear from like the Epoch Times or, these radical, like right-wing folks. Like you hear the same stuff and the same policy agenda pushed by Dore in relation to COVID that you hear from like the Great Barrington Declaration folks or the Brownstone Institute, which is this right-wing dark money group that emerged in 2021. Or even Scott Atlas, who is a former Trump, like, the former Trump COVID guy. Like, you hear the same policy agenda. There's this Dore has morphed politically over the pandemic and is I think very aligned now with the far right on certain issues. And that's why he appears on Tucker Carlson as frequently as he does. That's why they're amplifying him. So, I think it's important for people to understand sort of, what kind of progressive Jimmy Dore actually is. And I think that his work practices are relevant to that. So, these people who are freaking out and saying, "Oh, it's a nothing burger," or if you don't like it, just don't take the job. Like, you're exposing yourself. That's who you are. That's you value the personality more than your progressive politics.
Right. That's the limits of politics as consumption and personal fandom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Walker Bragman, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
for having me.
Thank you.
All right. We got Bradley in the Zoom.
We are about to be having Bradley in the Zoom, yes.
Roll Tide. Yeah, so Bradley Alsop is a producer on the Emma Sports Vigilant Network, ESVN, and we're going to talk to him about some sports stuff. Adam is definitely more the sports guy than I am. Super Bowl's tomorrow, right?
Yes, I may have heard that.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's a big football game happening tomorrow.
I
Two
literally,
teams, by the way, 2 teams are playing.
2 teams.
Yeah.
I literally forgot that the Super Bowl was happening, and yesterday I asked Adam if he could do an interview for a story on Sunday. I was like, hey, could you talk to these people on Sunday and maybe write up an article for us? And then I remembered, oh yeah, he's going to be watching the Super Bowl. He's going to be incapacitated all day and the next day probably.
Nah, not these days.
But
a few years ago, yes, but maybe not. Maybe not these days.
So Bradley Alsop, appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning.
Yes, of course. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. Apologies for all of the wrangling. I know I've been trying to come on for a few months, so I appreciate you guys taking the time as well. I'm very excited to talk to you guys.
Oh yeah.
Love when you call into the show, Jacob, on the Majority Report, and I'm very excited to be speaking with you both today.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah, and so the first thing is, I guess, is that I know that you are, you're kind of close to Emma because of your working on the show together, and so do you have an idea of how much money she gets from the Hump Day royalties? I don't know if you know this, Adam, but Emma coined the phrase Hump Day, and she's able to get royalties every time someone says that. Are you aware of what the level of that income is?
My NDA is stronger than the ones Jimmy Dore did. So I'm a locked box for many reasons, and I can't disclose that financial information.
Okay. Well, no, understand that, because I'm just asking because I wanted to try to get an idea of how much we're going to be able to get out of her in our lawsuit against ESVN for taking our second half of the program name, because we have been having overtime on our program.
No way.
The second half of our show has been overtime for a year and a half, for 2 years, and y'all are just coming out here pretending like you came up with this name, and so I'm just trying to figure out how much how much money we can get out of you for this copyright infringement and patent infringement.
That I'm gonna have to speak with our high-powered group of lawyers now, and probably mysteriously drop off this call as well. I might be going through a tunnel in my apartment. But yeah, actually, it's so funny. I apologies for any inadvertent fabulism there on our end, but a good pal of our show, Zeke Gonzalez, who does a lot of clipping of our show, he suggested it to us early on. We were like, yeah, that's a sports thing. That's that could be something to use as our second show, but I'll have to. When I return to the smoke-filled room that I sit in with a bunch of cigar chomping executives and with the Majority Report, we'll have to do some thinking about how to make things right for you guys.
Yeah, confer with the legal team.
We'll confer. We'll talk to our people. You talk to your people,
right?
And we'll talk again later, offline. So the first thing that Adam wanted to put to you is that we're that we're like a union show, and so for labor folks, for left folks who are not sports fans like me, what's the relevance of sports, I guess, for folks like us?
Yeah, I think the big thing that people have to realize that when it comes to kind of the intersection of sports and labor is and at least the idea of like why should you be interested when to people who are not very much immersed in the sports world, it's like, what am I concerned about guys who get paid millions of dollars to put on a uniform and play a sport with a ball, like put a ball in a basket or like throw a ball to another guy, and like I think that's like reducing it, or especially reducing it in terms of like what people might actually consider when they're talking about like sports in a more broader political in the more of a broader political spectrum than just wins and losses, like and things like that, like that are related to just sports itself. Like I think that's a big mission of our show of ESVN beyond just like our passion for the sports and the games themselves is to basically answer the question that you have, which is that when you actually maximize these things a little bit more, you can see players as workers, you can see ownership and front office structures as bosses, and you can see how that value from those players, that work, that being in front of a crowd, selling tickets, selling concessions, selling snacks, selling drinks, all of that stuff, that's labor being extracted from the players and the workers for these teams. And the biggest share, the largest share of the pie goes to the people who don't do anything but have the money to put the funnel into it. If you think about ownership structures in any of the four major sports leagues, the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, and the NHL, these are essentially for bad teams. Just as one example, it's the equivalent of a robber baron, private equity vulture type guy or group owning a distressed asset, making passive income by doing nothing. Right. And the people who are actually doing the work, who are actually creating the value for these teams and these franchises and these literal LLCs that are, the Denver Broncos, the Atlanta Hawks, whoever they may be, are not the people making the majority of the money, are not the people with the majority of the shares. And so you can really easily see parallels when you watch sports and you drill down a little bit further into that, how much a lot of people when the sausage gets made are materially exploited. And it's hard to parse this or fathom this when you know that a guy like LeBron, it is hard to make the case that I've made to a lot of people because it seems kind of absurd to be like, Steph Curry makes a shitload of money. Can I curse on here? Is that okay?
Yeah. We're off of the FM radio. Okay, cool. No FCC censorship.
Like Steph Curry makes a shitload of money. LeBron James makes a shitload of money. But relative to the amount of money that the Los Angeles Lakers or the Golden State Warriors makes every year, they are still underpaid. Right. They are still not making a proportionate share of the value that they actually bring to their teams. And so I understand that it seems like almost like small grapes to be like, oh, I mean, they're still making millions of dollars. Right. But that doesn't mean that there's not a guy up there. Don't get mad at LeBron James. Get mad at who owns the Lakers. Right. Like, Get mad at the people who are hoarding the money who don't do anything for it. All they do, their job is just ponying up the money. So they don't Oh, go ahead, Jacob.
No, well, and I mean that's exactly right. And then we have the workers. The workers should have the value that they create. And then if we think that there are some workers who make so much value that maybe they don't need all of that, then we can tax it, right? We can just take it as a society and redistribute it. But the idea that I should be opposed to LeBron making more money is so silly because there's somebody above him who's not doing anything to make the Los Angeles Lakers a valuable team, is even making more than him. So yeah, totally. And then also there's the thing that, which I think that these sports bosses, they love this idea because they're kind of in the shadows and people really don't think about them as much. And they think about LeBron James, who's a millionaire, and some of the one or two of these people are even getting into the $1 billion billionaire type folks. But then there's also, lots of people like backbenchers for these teams that are not making millions of dollars a year. Maybe they're making $1 million a year. And especially when you're talking about the NFL, the amount of damage that you're going to do to yourself, as a low-level backbencher, fourth string, whatever, you're just doing fine, and you will just be doing fine for the rest of your life. And, you're going to hopefully, even as a low-level, NFL player, you're going to be able to retire on that, and that's going to be your career. You'll have a few years and then you'll be fairly comfortable. But that's, they're not extravagantly wealthy, a lot of these people. And then especially even more, that's still the case when you're looking at the big leagues. Some of these professional athletes aren't just extravagantly wealthy, but even more than that, when you go down to the minor leagues, like we just talked to last week or the week before, the United Football League, the USFL, United States Football League. They're a minor league football team, and those players are only going to be making $60,000 a year, right? Which is fine for 3 months of work, but also it's like you're putting your body on a lot of risk for $60,000 a year. And then, you're talking, when you think about the minor league baseball players making $11,000 a year, some of these people, and how fit they have to stay, how much practice they have to do all year for $11,000 is just, people do not really have a proper understanding of professional sports as a job, I don't think.
Because, and it's a great point, both in terms of the NFL and the minor league system. And I mean, pre, of course, we can get into this as well. And pre a lot of the introduction of name, image, and likeness laws for college athletes, those certain areas were some of the most pernicious examples of like labor exploitation in sports. Minor league sports, the NFL in particular, because relative to the physical cost of being a football player, and the fact that many, if not all, at least a lion's share of non-premier tier NFL contracts are mostly non-guaranteed money. So in the NBA, it's different even for lesser players, and by lesser I just mean guys who are not in the top 20, top 30 players in the league. That money that they're getting is guaranteed. If they get injured, they're still getting a paycheck. If they don't meet a games threshold, they're still getting a paycheck. If you're a guy, if you're like a second string linebacker or a lower tier draft choice for a team in the NFL, if you get injured, there potentially will be stipulations and clauses in your contract where you're not getting paid for those games. You have to be healthy. You have to make sure that your body does not get destroyed in a game that is designed to destroy your body to play in order to make money. And that's happening in the biggest league in American sports that year in and year out prints money, that makes billions of dollars in revenue, that squeezes every last buck out of every last initiative, game, whatever the case may be. And there are guys on these teams that are essentially sometimes in the locker room or whatever getting shots of Toradol right before the game so they can play through a sprained ankle. And so they can get their game check. Right. It is such a good point to bring up the people who you might forget about when you think of these leagues and you think of the top players. there are a lot of people on a 53-man roster across 32
Right.
teams in the NFL who need to be taken care of, and a lot of them aren't. And especially the other thing is the average stint in the NFL, the average tenure for a garden variety NFL player is about 2 to 3 years. Some of these guys come in the league. They're 21 to 23 years old. Everything that they've been trained to do, sometimes they're out of a job at 25. That's a lot of years left to figure out what you're doing with the rest of your life.
Right.
And it's not guaranteed, and it's not particularly robust of a guarantee that the National Football League is going to make sure that you're on your feet for the rest of your life after what you gave to their game, to the owner's game, to Roger Goodell's game, for that 50 to 60 years after, when you're not valuable to the NFL anymore.
And
you're
it's not.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and
You're-
it's not just how much they give to the NFL in that short 2 to 3 year window that they come in, and then they're out of a job, and then they got to figure out what they're going to do for the 70 years left in their life, the 50 years, maybe more like 50 if you've played football your whole life, right?
Absolutely.
But so let's talk about the NCAA, because you don't get 2 to 3 years in the NFL from nowhere. You get 2 to 3 years in the NFL because you have spent 21 years of your life playing this really hazardous, dangerous game in, Little League and middle school and high school, and then at the NCAA, where at that level, these are like grown-ass men throwing around 200-300 pounds of weight. People at my church growing up, we stopped playing tackle football when we got to be 16 years old, and some of us were 200 pounds, and we started breaking bones. We were like, okay, this is a bit much, right? But these people in the NCAA, they're keeping on playing it. They're making their schools millions of dollars, and up until a few years ago, they weren't making anything. And I sent this article to you from, the source is pretty lame. It's a right-wing, media outlet in Alabama. But they were talking about Saban's opinion on name, image, and likeness. And Adam was, and maybe it's just because I don't know as much about like what's going on in the sports world. But when I read this, I was like, what the hell is, Adam said that Saban has actually been a lot better on this than some other coaches, but I'll read a little bit from this article for folks, and then I'll get Brad and Adam your reaction to this. Several high school football coaches recounted Saban's comments, including one where a representative of a possible high school recruit asked for $800,000 in NIL money from the university, and that didn't go over well with Saban. Quote, "I told him he can find another place to play. I'm not paying a kid a bunch of NIL money before he earns it," unquote, Saban was reported to have said. Saban also referenced a player that was no longer on the team due to NIL payment issues. Quote, "One of them wanted $500,000 and for us to get his girlfriend into law school at Alabama and pay for it. I showed him to the door," unquote, the head coach reportedly said. And it's like, talking about, I'm not going to pay this kid money before he earns it, this is the paternalism in these comments to me were just infuriating, because these aren't kids playing a game. These are, as we define them in the United States, adults who are earning millions of dollars for the University of Alabama. And you can say or not whether this or that one is worth $500,000 or $800,000. But the idea that this person, who is the highest paid public employee in the state of Alabama, making tens of millions of dollars a year, and, no doubt he's worth it, but the idea that somebody is acting so indignant about somebody asking for what they think they're worth, it's just like, it really hit me the wrong way. But Adam, you said that there are coaches who are way worse than Saban.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is Dabo Swinney.
Yep.
Brad, I don't know if that one comes to mind as well, but he's just, oh man, he's had a lot of really paternalistic kind of talk about this. He's been very, I think, antagonistic to the entire concept of players receiving money, period. Saban seems, as he has over the course of his career, adaptable. And that is how I'm perceiving Saban, is that he is kind of adapting to this new world. The thing about this NIL that I think is worth really distinguishing is that for all these years, these college athletes have been functioning like employees. They have created tremendous value. I mean, and just as an example, Oklahoma and Texas are trying to leave to go to the SEC.
Yep.
It's what, $100 million that they are spending to leave 1 year early, just to change the types of teams that they play, right? Just change their affiliation in the conference, get on different TV stations. All this, they want to move 1 year early. They're willing to shell out $100 million to do this, most of which is going to Fox, the TV network, in the negotiations. But I mean, that's the kind of money we're talking about. Tremendous wealth is being created by these college players. And all this time, you know, they have been restricted from what they could actually earn. A few years ago, and Brad, you may know more about this than me. I know several years ago, Northwestern University football players attempted to unionize.
Yep.
It was rejected. They were deemed not employees. So, but the push for some kind of player compensation has really, really grown in recent years, especially as we know more about the risk involved with football. And the NCAA had this brilliant idea of, well, we're not going to compensate the players. The colleges don't have to compensate the players. We'll just let people fill in the gap, right? And rich boosters can show up and create collectives of name, image, and likeness. And, you know, Billy Joe's car dealership in Tuscaloosa can sponsor. And that, you know, I don't know if you have more to speak on that, but to me, it was like it was a brilliant trick that the NCAA has played, right? Because now some players are getting money, so some people can be happy with that. Some people are bitching and moaning about that. But at the end of the day, NCAA and the colleges themselves are continuing to reap the benefits of these players sacrificing without an employee status.
Yeah, so before I get into that, because I have a lot to say about, you know, the dynamics at play there with the NCAA, but I just find it interesting that Nick Saban wasn't worried about earning his contract before he fucked up being on the head coach of the Miami Dolphins in the late 90s,
right.
Early 2000s. he seemed to be totally fine with getting that money straight up before proving that he could be a good NFL coach. And when it comes to Dabo Swinney, the head coach of Clemson, he is a evangelical right-wing freak. And he once said a few months ago at a press conference that the players and him have been participating in the name, image, and likeness game for a long time because they play with the name and image and likeness of the Lord in mind when they play. So
Lord bless really me as I hurt these people.
Right. It's a really neat trick for Dabo Swinney to employ, that he's this leader of men who like makes his players really faithful. But, you know, don't step out of line if you want a sponsorship from like Checkers or something, because that's a little too that's kind of arrogant before the Lord. This idea of being so sanctimonious that your players that are essentially indentured servants in this economy of college sports are kind of being audacious and a little inappropriate if they want to make money. And yet then on the other hand, that same person with those feelings can be literally, as you said about Saban, Jacob, Nick Saban in Alabama. Guess who is the highest paid public employee in South Carolina? It's not their governor. It's not even Shane Beamer, the coach of the University of South Carolina. It's Dabo Swinney at Clemson. So seemingly fine with a handout from the government there that's fully guaranteed, but nothing else for his players. So that's also what you have to remember when in terms of all of the laundering of these guys' images when it comes to coverage of these guys and their teams on ESPN or things like that, is no one wants to really acknowledge that they continuously will fuck over their cheap labor with zero recourse or without a second thought, because at the end of the day, their bag's never messed up. That their check's
Right.
always clear.
Right.
And
It's like we were talking earlier about the whole Jimmy Dore situation, a power imbalance.
Right.
There's the power imbalance here is significant.
I mean, could you just imagine for 1 second, like thinking about a union trade union apprenticeship program where the director of the program is like, I don't know about paying this guy, $20 an hour. I don't know if he's earned it yet, right? Like you just don't. And we're talking about the same people. We're talking about the same people, whether, they're 18 years old going into a trade union apprenticeship or they're 18 years old going to play for a D1 school. These are people that are working. These are people that are creating value. And in the case of the latter, people working for, an NCAA D1 school, some of them are creating millions of dollars of value. Like an ironworker apprentice isn't going to necessarily create $1 million of value in his first year, right? But their directors aren't complaining and acting all indignant and paternalistic about them saying, or about paying them. It's just so insane to me.
And with that in mind too, the other thing is that I think is a common misconception, and not necessarily like, I don't think there's as much of this when it comes to college athletes, because there's a little bit, it's the narrative isn't like, oh, like you're so entitled that you get to play. Sometimes there's a little bit of that for like basketball players at D1 schools, like you're so entitled, like you got a free ride, like you got like, you basically just go to school to be a basketball player. Like there is sometimes that type of rhetoric, but there's also on the other side of that the sanitizing rhetoric of, look how much these guys play just for the love of the game. Like they play for the love of the game. All they get out from it is just victory, these intangible aspects of the game, just winning, like overcoming odds. Like there's so much valorizing and narrativizing and sanitizing for example, March Madness, where it's like all of these guys coming together for some of their last rides to really prove themselves. And there's, with the underwriting veneer, obviously, that literally none of these guys are getting paid to play directly by the NCAA. A lot of them are essentially, with respect, they're nobodies. They're not going to be, not every player from Mercer College or from North Carolina A&T is going to get a walk-on or going to get a draft spot in the next NBA draft.
Right.
These guys, once these games are over, either they have another year at school or they're done playing. They're forever. They are done playing. Their college basketball careers and basketball careers, period, are over. And with all of that being said, that's never really discussed from a labor perspective, or it's discussed from a sports perspective. That it's so tragic. Like left it all out on the floor. His last game, like he gave everything for this team. It's like, yeah, he gave everything and he received nothing basically.
Right.
He gave it all, and his coach will get paid another year. He's gonna have to go find a job. And the other things when you think about that in the jobs context is, I bring up all of these perceptions because sometimes I don't think people understand that college athletes, from the football players, basketball players, on down to the crew team, badminton players, anything, take your pick, water polo. These are 7-day-a-week engagements,
yes,
obligations. You are practicing, you are watching film, you are working out, you are in team meetings, you are strategizing, and then you play a game, and you are traveling for those games when you are not home.
Right, and the type of courses you take, the scheduling of your courses, the degree that you major in. I mean, all of it is shaped by that.
It surrounds exactly. It is not outside in sports to academics. The academics surround your time as an athlete.
Right.
It dictates your entire life. It is not something where it's like, oh yeah, like I'm a college student and then I go play basketball on Saturdays. It's
right.
I'm an athlete and I have to be in college as well. And people will think that maybe I just got this free ride, I don't have a course load or whatever, but yet I'm also doing this work that a English major is not doing at all.
Right.
And I'm getting no money for it. I'm getting no for the value of my labor, with all of the TV rights that schools get, with all of the revenue streams that they get within their conferences, because every school in a conference gets a piece of the pie from conference television network deals like SEC network, Big Ten network, ACC network, and also how when those games from those conferences make it onto major networks like ESPN or one of the big four networks, they all get a share of that pot. The commissioners get a share of that. The boosters, the boards of trustees get a share of that. The athletes don't.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of work. It's a similar thing that like it is in the big four sports leagues, but it's almost more cartel. It's more cartelized, and I don't. I might be making that word up, but people sometimes it's almost a cliche now when people consider the NCAA as a cartel. But if I'm a massive national conglomeration of corporations and superstructures of like different conferences with different teams and different commissioners and different members, I am just a multi-tentacled organization that exploits my labor to make money.
Yeah.
What is the difference in the structure than the bosses getting a kickback from everything else that their middle managers are making for them by exploiting the people below them who are also almost like the corner guys selling for them, for example. Not to take that metaphor too far, but it's essentially it is a structure where the value is created at the bottom and it only sifts upward.
Right.
The profits only get maximized as the people doing less of the amount of work receive a larger share from the people actually doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this it's so, and I used to hear some of what you were talking about, like from people watching. I think, like you said, a lot of this rhetoric has died down, but about like how lucky they are.
I mean, it's something I've emphasized on the show before is that at least for me growing up in the South, if I ever heard anything about unions on the news, it was probably on ESPN, right? It was probably in the sports section of the newspaper. I mean, it is one of the most high-profile labor management relationships, that of the professional athlete, and it's one of the most high-profile set of unions, the NFLPA and all of the player unions. So I appreciate you kind of breaking that down and talking through that with us. I think there's a lot to dive in there, and I think more and more people are waking up to the reality that these folks are workers, that they are performing labor, whether they're classified as amateurs or professionals or not. So my personal hope would be that these players can organize, and there's hints of that already. Now, whether they would say collectively bargain with a school or perhaps on a conference level, all that, it's hard to say where it's all going to go. But, that would be my thoughts, is that through organization is going to be the best means for the players to actually have some security, have some safety, have some, longevity in their plans. Because I'm sure, as we see right now, some folks are going to be able to get some money. But how equitable is that? How structured is that in terms of real working conditions and like the impact there? There's a lot that needs to be addressed. And so I would encourage the players to organize, and I think it's incumbent on all of us in the labor movement to, lock arms with them as fellow workers and bring them into the movement.
Yeah. So speaking of sports unions, this is the final story that I told you that we wanted to talk with you about today, Brad, is Marty Walsh left the position of Secretary of the Department of Labor to be a director for the National Hockey League Players Association. And this, by all accounts, it stunned everybody. It stunned Biden. It stunned, like this really, really came out of nowhere. And it's just unimaginable that you would give up labor secretary to be, I guess it's unimaginable to me as somebody who cares about the labor movement, let's say, that I would give up being labor secretary to be the director of the National Hockey League Players Association.
Yeah, I'm pretty fascinated by this development because, like, on one hand, I understand that, like, as you were saying, Adam, that like a lot of the battlefields of labor historically have been in sports, in the sense that historically, like in the late 60s, there was this player in the MLB, Curt Flood, who he was attempting to reject a trade. He was trying to refuse to be traded to another team. And he basically filed kind of like an arbitration, like a labor suit against the MLB, saying that I'm a worker, I'm allowed to choose where I work. And he appealed that all the way to the Supreme Court, but he lost. And that was one of the biggest labor cases in the late 1960s about like whether these athletes are workers or not, and if they can be considered workers or not. And funnily enough, when it's still in the vein of baseball, one of the most successful MLBPA heads that really strengthened the MLB, Major League Baseball Players Union, Players Association, was a man named Marvin Miller, who was initially really heavily involved with the international mine workers during World War II, and then later on the iron workers, and then he ultimately became the head of the MLBPA and really strengthened labor rights for the MLB after their conferences sort of splintered to make the MLB the primary baseball league. I bring all of this up to say that like it's fascinating how sometimes these things really break into the national consciousness, and a guy like Marty Walsh is, for whatever reason, seeing this opportunity to think that he could be, I guess in his mind, because of course I can't speak to what he's thinking, but it kind of does boggle the mind from my perspective to think that he could affect more change or bring more cachet to the NHLPA, as opposed to being a literal cabinet secretary affecting labor policy for the entire country. And if he wanted to help those players or assist those players, he could certainly do that in a more sectoral way across the board than just representing hockey players at large. My biggest curiosity when it comes to this as well, as a result, is I'm wondering how big of a Bruins fan Marty Walsh is. And I'm wondering if those ticket packages are kind of nice for an NHL official to maybe Marty doesn't like living in DC. Maybe he doesn't like the bureaucracy, and maybe he'd like to just go see a few more home games back in Boston.
Have you read Robert Kuttner's piece about this in the American Prospect?
No, I haven't, but I love Bob's a great writer. I love reading his stuff. What was he saying?
So this is very interesting. He says that Walsh got the offer partly because of his close ties to Boston Bruins owner and NHL Board of Governors chair Jeremy Jacobs, who has donated thousands of dollars to Walsh's campaign committees over the years.
Oh, shocker.
So,
just what you love as the union to hear that your new leader is in tight with ownership. When Jacob texted me this, my first response was, well, the NHL players are about to get screwed on their next contract. If his term in DC was any indication of how his leadership will go.
Well, his
but
term
yeah, I guess
as,
it's less controversial to be in the NHL than busting national rail strikes.
Right. His term as labor secretary, but also, the idea that I'm going to have a union representative who's big buddies, who has literally gotten money from my boss, that's
suspect.
Yeah. Sus.
Yeah, you wouldn't feel great about it if you're a hockey player, if you had any sort of understanding of how the Department of Labor and the Biden administration completely, and they're probably their most recent large labor action, essentially forced rail workers to accept 1 day of sick leave and then call it a day, to be like, hey, we can't really have this happen right now. It's near the holidays. Like, listen, I'm with you guys. I love workers. I love trains. I'm Amtrak Joe, remember? But like, get back to work and we'll figure this out a little bit later. All right. And to see that be essentially what the tenor of the largest labor situation that specifically came before the federal government, how that was handled, then the fact that Marty Walsh was the head of that department where that happened, and then seeing this disclosure that maybe a little bit of a deal sweetener is that his two friends are heavy investors in his local team and heavy investors in Marty Walsh. You don't. It's not great to have a guy whose biggest track record before leaving his most recent position was essentially breaking a rail strike, and then seeing that he's buddy with ownership for when you need to ratify your next contract.
Yeah, not good.
Not at all. So,
and I think it's important. That this ties in exactly to what we were talking about initially. Is that this is important because it's not like this won't just affect hockey players if these things come to fruition this way. Labor is like any other industry or like any other policy area. These things leak into each other. If there's a bad situation where Walsh sides with management over players and they can't ratify a contract, if there's a lockout, if there's a protracted strike, it still hurts the players to not be able to play and make money. And if that is actually the case, Rob Manfred in the MLB, who's the current MLB commissioner, but was known as essentially Bud Selig, the former MLB commissioner's fixer, essentially. He kind of was just the guy to put out fires and stamp out dissent in the league. What if Rob Manfred says, "Oh, look, Marty Walsh, Biden's labor secretary, he's doing that. Maybe I'll take some notes for our next labor negotiation." Exactly. Adam Silver, a guy who, NBA writers and fans alike love to be like, this league is different, like he's so cool and loves players. It's like he loves them until they criticize China, and he loves them until they mess with his money. So maybe he can be like, listen, I'm taking notes from this. So and then Roger Goodell, the ultimate vampire, the ultimate toady to all the owners, like all of this. I bring all of these guys up to say these unique patterns of like evilness or like ways to screw over workers. They won't just stay in hockey if that's the case. They will seep into other aspects of sports, and they can seep into other aspects of labor. There's always going to be some level of a laboratory to see how you can uniquely crush workers. And Adam, I think pointed to it in the sense of the NCAA essentially saying, what if we just neoliberalized paying student athletes? They work for us, but somebody else pays them. They go to school at a public institution, but the car wash says, "Oh, you're funny. We'll give you $3,000 for an ad, but it keeps us clean, so we don't have to actually pay you or be your employer."
Right.
Yeah.
Brad, we're gonna have you on again, I'm sure, because I could talk sports from a left-wing labor perspective all day.
Oh, sure, I'd love to. This is great.
A lot we didn't get to.
Yeah, we have to. We'll have to talk about. We'll have to get into a deep Brett Favre dive the next time.
Yes, I've got my Southern Miss sweatshirt on today. For better or worse, he's our most famous alum.
That's right.
I was in the womb when my mom and dad were watching him play in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. So for better or worse, so I was born and raised a Brett Favre fan, and now he's one of the most notorious crooks of my home state.
An iconic New York Jet.
Allegedly. I don't want to get sued. He's on a suing streak this week. He's suing folks.
We don't want to be like Pat McAfee and Shannon Sharp getting a cease and desist from saying protected speech from legal aficionado Brett Favre.
Yeah, well, I guess we can wrap up with predictions for the Super Bowl tomorrow, I guess, unless Adam or Brad,
sure.
you had any other ideas to wrap up this segment.
No, that'd be good. That's fine. Yeah, we every week on ESVN this season we basically had given our three. I don't actually bet on them. I just give. I'm less of a gambler than Emma is. I dabble, but I don't encourage the audience to. That's their choice. But we give picks just basically like teams against the spread or over unders and things like that.
And when is it that you give your picks?
We give those on Thursdays on OT.
Yeah.
Okay. Notably, we're taking a gamble with the name already, so I figured we would just do more gambling on Thursdays to begin with. But Emma and I differ. Emma thinks the Chiefs will take it, but I just think that I have underestimated the Eagles all season. I've kind of been like, at some point, like their invincibility will end, and they've just really kind of steamrolled the entire league, absent 2 games where they lost. So I'm having trouble picking against them, despite knowing that Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs are very willing and able to pull a rabbit out of the hat to win games in these kind of like inscrutable, inexplicable fashions. They've done it 5 years in a row, so it's certainly possible. But I think that this Eagles team might be top to bottom one of the most talented teams I've seen in a while, and I think they can get it done.
I am like 100% in agreement with you. I want the Eagles to win. I'm leaning towards the Eagles for all the reasons you described. It doesn't hurt that we have a Southern Miss player on the Philadelphia Eagles, Quez Watkins, right here. From Alabama.
I love Quez.
But there is that part of me that knows Patrick Mahomes just can pull off miracles and make some amazing plays. So there's part of me that thinks he's going to pull it off like in the last, 2 minutes of the game. But I'm gonna stick with the Eagles. I think the Eagles have been hot. It'd be nice to see Jalen Hurts win one. I mean,
definitely
talk about a guy who got a lot of shit talked about him throughout his career. And just got to love a comeback story like that. You get bounced out of Alabama, you go somewhere else, make it into the pros, and now here he's in the Super Bowl. So I'm going to go with Philly, knowing that Patrick Mahomes may screw that up in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's my feelings exactly. I'm ready to be proved wrong again by Patrick Mahomes. Seemingly happens every year.
Now the question is, will there be any good commercials? We won't have many Bitcoin crypto-related commercials this year. If I had to guess, looks like we lost those last year.
Unless they're just going to be like some of those, unless they're just going to go the Wells Fargo route and be like, we're very sorry for being essentially we here at Crypto.com are extremely regretful that we bilked all of our customers and don't have actually any paper money at in our concerns anymore. But
that would be hilarious.
We're learning. We are all learning, and we can't wait to be servicing you again soon.
Yeah,
followed up by just another Wells Fargo one.
I hope that's what happens. We see the crypto apology PR campaign tomorrow. We'll see.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Bradley, also appreciate you coming on. Going to have you on again.
Yes, of course, guys. Thanks so much. Take care. See you guys soon.
Bye.
So, Adam, how do you want to wrap up? Do you want to hit some of these local stories, or do you want to run through these grievance testimonials?
Let's see here.
We've got this, the overtime taxes, the Medicaid, and the Chilton County lawsuit, or we've got the grievance.
I think this finished with some cool grievance wins.
Okay.
I like the sound of finishing with that. We can address the taxes and Medicaid next week. To me, the two are very intertwined. So let's do that.
All right. Yeah. So back in the end of January, Twitter account at Union Elections, username Daily Union Elections. They're an account that they it's pretty self-explanatory, right? They put out some information about union elections because they have it every day, and so like, oh hey, here's this union election that just came out, and he'll like screenshot NLRB filings. It's pretty cool account. And he also engages sometimes in discourse. And this time he created some discourse when he tweeted out, "Union folks, what is the best grievance /ULP that you have ever won?" So we picked out about 5 or 6 really cool ones, and but we're going to start off with Adam, some testimonies from Adam, because you've got some pretty cool ones, right?
Yeah, I certainly had a lot of grievances, and did not really deal with ULPs much, at least in my day job. They were relevant to my staff union position, but thinking about some successful grievances and settlements, I spent over 5 years representing workers in Huntsville City Schools, and I think when I added it all up, I was able to put over $250,000 back into the pockets of our members. that's not insignificant. That's just the pay-related cases. Yeah, obviously, there were grievances that weren't involving pay. That I had a string of several non-certified support employees who were working in operations who had been misclassified, and they had been just strung along for years with promises of being regraded and given raises. It took a mountain of documentation, threats of lawyers, and months of persistence, but we won some of those cases, and those members received significant pay increases. And so that makes up a fair chunk of that total amount. But the biggest single win in terms of dollar amount, is also possibly my favorite win. It was several years back. I don't know the exact year, but it was a year where the state legislature passed a 4% pay raise across the board for public school employees when at the same time PHIP raised their health insurance cost. It's funny how that always seems to happen hand in hand. Well, we had this long-time educator here in Huntsville. He had well over 30 years of service. Shout out to Bill if you're listening. And this is the type of guy who always reads the fine print. He is that guy. He inspected his check stubs very closely, looking for that 4% raise. And he started doing the math and realized he didn't get the full 4%. See, Huntsville City Schools used to pay above the state minimum for certified educators. But then you had the state intervention and Wardynski experiment in the early 2010s, during which time the district reverted to paying the state minimum salary matrix for new hires. So you had two different pay scales, essentially. You had the veteran teachers who were grandfathered in above state minimum and all the new folks coming in at the state minimum. So when the state pay raise came around, Huntsville City Schools gave everyone a raise based off a 4% adjustment to the state minimum, not the actual salaries that people were making, which of course was the intent. So that meant hundreds of veteran teachers, the teachers who had actually stuck around through all the madness and some of the highest turnover in the state, were in effect penalized by receiving a pay increase of less than 4% of their salary. And that decision took place in a budget approved and implemented before Dr. Matt Aiken became superintendent. He was only there for a brief time, but during his tenure, I was able to make the case to him about this pay raise injustice, and he agreed to have his CFO settle the issue. Hundreds of teachers received a back pay check as well as the adjustment to their monthly salary going forward. And I do give a lot of credit to that teacher, Bill, who was not only careful enough to analyze his pay stub, but was persistent in bringing it to my attention as his rep, to the district's attention, and working with me as his rep to keep the issue alive. And I will give credit to the Huntsville City Schools and superintendent and CFO at the time, Matt Aiken and Bob Haygood, for doing the right thing. Unfortunately, that's not as common as it should be. And it was nice to have an administration that would actually respond to the evidence and take appropriate action without having to be shamed in the media or threatened with litigation, even if, sure, we had to stay on them for a pretty long while. It was a win-win, right? The employees were made whole. The district avoided bad PR and legal costs by working with me to settle this. And instead of legal cost and bad PR, the new administration made a positive impression on their most seasoned teachers. So for me, it's a good reminder that honestly, there's a lot of opportunities for win-wins like that. If management is willing to operate in good faith. And when management operates in good faith and is responsive to the employees and their representatives, they might just find they can prevent and quickly remedy issues in the workplace before they even become a grievance, ULP, or lawsuit. So that's my little grievance story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, the idea, there's certainly an inherent conflict between employees and bosses, right? Like
which we are very clear about, and I know that's often not so clear
from some places, even some unions, right?
Right, absolutely.
But there are, like you said, there are lots of instances where where really the conflict is manufactured by the boss, and it doesn't have to be there. There are genuinely so many fights that if the bosses just gave workers what they were asking for, it would actually be good for both parties. Maybe there are some, or there are some, certainly, that's not the case. There are certainly some cases where, workers will win at the expense of bosses, or bosses will win at the expense of workers. But there are some instances like the one that you just laid out where workers winning is good for, the organization and the employers as
Right.
well.
I mean, they made a mistake. I personally believe it was an intentional mistake by the person responsible at the time. But whether it was intentional or not, it was a mistake, and they owned up to it and they fixed it. And it's amazing how much easier that went than if they had just played hardball with me and forced me to get ugly in that fight and bring other people involved, or get the media or lawyers involved. It would have ultimately cost them more to go the adversarial route.
Yeah. And
at least they had enough sense to do the math and figure that out. But as you said, oftentimes that's just not the case.
Yeah. Adam is not the only guy with a good grievance ULP story that is affiliated with the Valley Labor Report. David replied to the Union Elections account, and he recounted a story where 7 employees were laid off against the collective bargaining agreement for 6 months, and he got them recalled with back pay and all benefits made whole. Can't remember the exact number, but roughly $750,000. Good day for the home team. And indeed, $750,000 for 7 employees.
That's great.
That's fantastic. That's really great. And I didn't include these in the graphic requests to Joe, but David ended up fighting with this guy in his replies who was saying that, oh, this is actually bad for the employees. Like, what, whatever. Well, they shouldn't have asked for that much, $750,000 for doing nothing. And it's like, the employer shouldn't have broken the contract. Like, the idea, this was presumably just a working person that is so, brain rotted that he's in this situation where the employer was wrong, clearly, paid $750,000 because they were wrong, and this guy is somehow saying, oh, no, the employees shouldn't have asked for that. Like, the idea,
that's pretty pitiful.
It was wild. Jamie, somebody that I don't know but had a very good story, said the grievance in itself isn't anything impressive, but when we were just organized, the first time I got called in as a steward, they handed me the employee's write-up and stated they intended to suspend him for 1 day. I read it, looked up, and just said no, and they accepted. So that's great. We love easy wins like that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, if only they all worked that way, right?
Dave Camper, somebody that we haven't had on the show, but who's been a supporter of the program, and
absolutely,
we appreciate that. And I've had good conversation with him on Twitter. He said, "I got a probationary employee, as in no contractual right to just cause, reinstated with full back pay by demonstrating disability discrimination. Didn't even have to take it to arbitration. Kicked their ass in the grievance meeting, and they called the next day to settle." Great job, Dave. We love to hear stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's also why we do talk about EEOCs and understanding your rights under Title VII and that kind of thing, because sometimes it's a factor, even if you don't even think it's a factor.
Right.
And so it's important to know your rights there.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael Murphy said, company policy prohibited union T-shirts. An employee quit instead of taking off his T-shirt. I was able to get a $20,000 in back pay award for Hobson's Choice constructive discharge. Do you know what Hobson's Choice means?
No.
I think that was, I probably should have looked that up, but it sounds like that's some kind of terminology, but that's pretty cool. Getting $20,000 in back pay for a constructive discharge for somebody that quit. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Constructive discharge is a hell of a practice that is very, very prevalent.
Yeah. The next one is from Patrick Shepard. He is, I think he's currently the Southern organizer for DSA, something like that. He said, supervisor distributed offer letters and then tried to rescind them. I got 25 people paid for 6 months of a job that they didn't do.
Sweet.
Love to see it. Love to see it.
Bet your supervisor thought hard next time.
Yeah. Doki Chamato said, we were organizing right before COVID. COVID hit. They laid us off. We filed a ULP, won, come back with employer-paid health care, 22% wage increases, and a path to full-time for part-timers. Our CFO and HR manager quit because the L was too heavy for them to carry around every day. The ULP said that they were using this as an excuse not to bargain, even though the staff had voted for the union. We negotiated through being laid off and finished right when the ULP was resolved. So everyone got their jobs back and a new contract. We saved roughly 40 jobs. That is fantastic. Love to see it. Love to see the union W's. Big dubs up on the screen. So that's going to be it for us this week. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us. Good show, Adam. Thanks for doing what you do over there.
Yeah, and don't forget to take the survey, y'all. Don't forget TVLR.fm/expand is our February fundraiser link. If you haven't already, share it around. See if we can get those numbers up, y'all.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're definitely, because we tout that our biggest single source of funding is from our listeners, and that's true. But it is only one of like 9 or 10, right? So it only makes up approximately like 11 or 12% listener support. Only makes up about 11 or 12% of our income. And so we definitely need union sponsors and union support to continue doing the program as it exists, but certainly to expand it. And so if you're a member of a union, please do consider asking your union to be a sponsor. You can do that at the local or international level or regional level. Unions can sponsor the program through purchasing advertisements through just their regular general fund, or they can purchase advertisements through their PAC funds, which I think are even, we were talking earlier in the main show about, the PAC funds. I would like to believe that spending dollar for dollar from PAC funds going to us is going to be much more valuable ultimately in the final analysis than a dollar going to some politician. So definitely consider that if you have control of PAC funds, or if you if you're interested in if you know people on the PAC committees, consider that. If you want to become a sustaining member, tvlr.fm/donate. Throw up our shirts on the screen again really quick. Cycle through those colors just so people can get a final look at them.
Yeah.
Those are fantastic shirts. Definitely check out those shirts at tvlr.fm/store, featuring the amazing artwork of Tabitha Arnold. Shirts are $32 for a local pickup. And if you're not local, but you have reason to believe that we will be in the same area at some point, feel free to also pick local pickup as well. $32 for local pickup, a little bit more for shipping. Check it out, tvlr.fm/store. Until next week, see you later. All power to the workers.